Chapter 520, Inheritance. The Thousand-Year Battle. The Taoist unique venerate skill is indeed formidable. If one can grasp its essence, dominating a corner of the great thousand world would not be an issue. However, this skill is not so easy to cultivate. The immortal seeker said nonchalantly as his thoughts lingered on the distant holy court. He knew very well how powerful the silent destruction god emperor was, and for that reason he felt the situation in the world was spiraling out of control. He was only a reincarnated being. He could not intervene in the workings of the heavenly Tao. His role was to assist others. But no matter how great the opportunity he provided Zhu Shi, for her to possess the strength to contend with the silent destruction god emperor before the change of the era was utterly impossible. After Zhu Shi mentioned the Taoist unique venerate skill, her confusion resurfaced. She asked, "What exactly is the origin of the Taoist unique venerate skill? In the process of cultivating it, I saw many figures. If they all practice this skill, do they belong to the same sect?" The immortal seeker looked at her and smiled. Not just anyone can cultivate the Taoist unique venerate skill. This skill is passed down in a single lineage, and I too have only received its technique, never having cultivated it myself. Zhu Shi pondered this after hearing his words. The immortal seeker stood up and said, "Continue with your cultivation. I'll step out for a bit." Zhu Shi did not inquire further but closed her eyes and continued to perceive the Taoist unique venerate skill. Even though she had regained her memories of Xianxia, her interest in the Taoist unique venerate skill remained. With her talent, comprehending the Taoist unique venerate skill still proved to be a struggle, which was enough to indicate the unfathomable depth of this skill. The arrival of the silent destruction god emperor and others did not change the overall situation of the world. Against the backdrop of strife between the holy court and immortal dynasty, prodigies rose, and great cultivators who had been in seclusion for long periods broke through their limits, reaching higher realms, shaking heaven and earth. The number of living beings between heaven and earth dwindled, with cultivators moving toward the central region of the celestial spirit great world and mortal spirits fleeing to the edges. The number of mortals on the nine-spirit continent was increasing, leading to sects springing up like bamboo shoots after a rainstorm, and even demons began staking out their territories. The Taoist field of the beginningless, situated near the Qianquan sect, fortunately faced no trouble. On this day, Xianxia and 4 others came into the forest to meet an exen. All 5 had successively reached the nirvana realm in cultivation, but they still acted with restraint in front of an exen. They could never ascertain Enzin's cultivation level, so they believed her realm to be far above theirs. "A sect's main technique inheritance is missing?" An exen asked, frowning. Xianxia's face showed a bit of awkwardness. He cleared his throat, braced himself, and said, "Indeed, figures from the sea sects have appeared on the fringes of the mainland. They have deeper resources and are constantly recruiting mainland cultivators. Numerous families and prodigies in our Qianquan sect have been poached. Ultimately, the Qianquan sect lacks exceptional advantages." He felt there was no reason to come to an exen, but recalling the thousands of years they had known each other and the familiarity that had grown, coupled with the urging from the higher-ups in the sect, they had no choice but to approach her. The Qianquan sect was no longer just their sect but belonged to 1,000,000 disciples. For the future of the sect, what was the harm in losing face? After all, Xianxia was prepared for the awkwardness of being rejected. Cheng Meng followed up, "Senior, we dare not demand that you bestow upon us such an inheritance, but even just pointing us in the right direction would be appreciated." The other 3 echoed in agreement. The 5 of them had ventured out for 1,000 years, but within the entirety of heaven and earth, they were still at the bottom. Their cultivation techniques, spells, and divine skills were quite mediocre within the immortal Tao realm. An exen quietly watched them, making them so ashamed that they wished they could shrink into the ground. Suddenly, an exen pursed her lips in a smile and said, "I do indeed have an inheritance that suits you." At these words, the 5 of them looked up at her with surprise. An exen raised her right hand and with a flick of her finger, 5 secret manuals appeared in her hand. The covers of these 5 secret manuals bore no titles, and within Xin's actions, Xianxia and his 4 companions exchanged perplexed looks. The techniques and divine skills of the Immortal Dao realm were vast and boundless, definitely not something that could be contained within just 5 books. They dared not offend an Exen, however, and could only grumble in their hearts. "Choose one," an Exen said with a smile, feeling secretly thrilled. Was this what it felt like to pass on one's teachings? Before coming here today, her master had handed her the 5 secret manuals. She had been puzzled at first, but after Xianxia and his companions spoke up, she came to admire her master's foresight. This, Xianxia frowned, could a legacy be passed down in such a frivolous manner? An Xian raised an eyebrow, and Xianxia immediately stepped forward to draw a manual from her hands. Seeing this, an Xian put the other 4 manuals into her sleeve and turned to leave, leaving behind a final remark. "This cultivation technique will now be the main technique of your Qingkuan sect. I hope you will use it for good." Hearing this, Xianxia and the others hastily paid their respects and watched her figure disappear into the depths of the forest before they gathered to examine the manual. Xianxia opened the first page and read aloud, "Heaven and Earth Primordial Skill. Qingkuan? It does suit our sect's name, but..." Gu Changxing hesitated. He wanted to say an Xian was playing a trick on them, but feared being overheard by her. Xianxia turned to the second page, and instantly, a burst of golden light emanated from within, enveloping the 5 cultivators. Their expressions changed dramatically, and their gazes became distant and unfocused. By the lakeside, Guwen was sparring with Chen Chuan in swordsmanship. Having reached the Immortal Dao realm, the actual moves were no longer important, but Guwen used them to guide Chen Chuan towards Sword Dao enlightenment. Chen Chuan had an extremely high comprehension of Sword Dao. Each year, he could feel himself growing stronger, but whenever he sparred with his master, he felt his own Sword Dao was childlike and posed no threat to his master. Guwen held the Cyan Hong sword with the blade sheathed, countering Chen Chuan's sword techniques with just the scabbard, and leading him into other moves. At a glance, Chen Chuan seemed like a puppet effortlessly manipulated by him. LV Xian sat under a tree not far away, intently watching, seeking to understand Guwen's Sword Dao. Though he did not specialize in Sword Dao, having seen the 3,000 Great Dao, he believed he could gain insight by analogy. After a while, Guwen pressed the scabbard to Chen Chuan's forehead, immobilizing him, signaling the end of their sparring session. Chen Chuan let out a sigh of relief, a smile spreading across his face. "Master, I understand now." Guwen sheathed his sword and then beckoned to LV Xian, who immediately ran over. "What do you think about holding a contest in our dojo every 1,000 years, where except for me, all of you participate?" Guwen asked with a smile. Hearing this, both LV Xian and Chen Chuan's eyes lit up. They both harbored competitive spirits and were naturally eager to prove themselves before their master. The 2 agreed without hesitation, even somewhat impatient to start. Guwen had suggested this because everyone in the dojo had already reached the Nirvana realm, and there were no particularly weak practitioners. Moreover, each one had received his personal teachings, and the Taoist techniques and divine skills they possessed were distinct. Of course, besides applying pressure to his disciples, he also wanted to liven things up. "It won't be a contest of who's strongest. Each time, I will personally select your opponents. You only have to fight one battle, and after 10,000 years, you all will inevitably have faced each other," Guwen said, still smiling. LV Xian and Chen Chuan naturally had no objections and were already looking forward to it. "They'll tell you in advance, you 2 will be each other's first opponents," Guwen said with a chuckle. Upon hearing this, LV Xian and Chen Chuan instinctively looked at each other, then after their initial shock, a fighting spirit and confidence ignited in their eyes, each believing they could win. Chapter 521. The shock of candles star. The arrangement for the once-in-millennium combat spread quickly throughout the Taoist field of the beginningless, invigorating everyone. Staying within the dojo, they spent most of their time in cultivation, which inevitably could become monotonous, so having something to look forward to was naturally good. Plus, they wanted to test the results of their cultivation. Unlike casual sparring, a combat hosted by Guwen was sure to be taken seriously. Even an Exan wanted to see how strong she could be when she went all out. At dusk, The forest swayed gently with the wind, quiet and exquisitely beautiful. Can I participate too? The ghost mother of Ephemera, dressed in black, stood beside Guwen and asked excitedly. Guwen was admiring a newly matured spirit flower. He replied, "Would I really be playing a trick on you?" The ghost mother of Ephemera's heart raced. She understood what participating in the combat meant. It meant that Guwen had accepted her. As she excitedly moved to kneel, an invisible force stopped her. I've said before, within the Taoist field of the beginningless, there is no need for such formalities, Guwen said, his face showing satisfaction. The quality of this spirit flower was good. It could be transplanted to his study. The ghost mother of Ephemera nodded, her heart pounding fast. After the joy, she felt pressure. The people at the dojo were not simple. Guwen didn't pay attention to what she was thinking. Taking the spirit flower, he left, while the ghost mother of Ephemera still respectfully bowed to his retreating figure. This is an opportunity one cannot miss. Her eyes sparkling, she felt a surge of power throughout her body. In the Taoist field of the beginningless, there was no lack of heavenly materials and earthly treasures, and with a great power like Guwen as a mentor, the so-called loss of freedom, she thought, was not permanent. As long as she performed well, there would come a day when Guwen would need her, send her on missions, and then she could return to the delights of the human world. In the blink of an eye, another 100 years passed. The autumn wind blew into the third medicine valley of the supreme sect where LV Baden, with his white hair, stood in front of a medicine garden. Looking at the medicinal herbs, he seemed to see a blurred figure. It was as if a scene from long ago overlapped before his eyes. Long Qing came to his side and asked, "Sect leader, what are you thinking about? You're not reminiscing about my master again, are you?" "Don't worry, he's definitely fine." LV Baden came to his senses and looked at Long Qing, his face involuntarily forming a smile. He felt that Long Qing was very much like Guwen, not just in stature but also in appearance. Guwen had many disciples, but only Long Qing resembled him. He couldn't help but suspect that Long Qing might actually be a child Guwen had left in the outside world. Perhaps there was a story behind it, and that's why Guwen had not made clear his relationship with Long Qing. Because of such a suspicion, LV Baden felt close to Long Qing and had already started to consider him the successor as sect leader. With the connection of being a disciple of the supporting Tao Sword Venerable, it would certainly not be difficult for Long Qing to take the position in the future. The heaven-splitting axe was still on the heaven-repairing platform. As long as the sword intent of the supporting Tao Sword Venerable remained, the supreme sect couldn't forget or overlook the Sword Venerable. "Are you ready to be the sect leader?" LV Baden asked with a smile. Upon hearing this, Long Qing showed a confident smile and said, "Of course I'm ready. With Senior Candle Star supporting me, I believe I can handle any trouble that comes my way." Hearing him mention Candle Star, LV Baden didn't pay too much attention. Strong as Candle Star might be, could he be as strong as Guwen? He was the sect leader who often leveraged the power of the supporting Tao Sword Venerable. LV Baden began to instruct him on what to pay attention to as sect leader. Long Qing listened earnestly. Many said that LV Baden wasn't formidable enough and that he only held his position because of the supporting Tao Sword Venerable. But in Long Qing's eyes, that was precisely what made LV Baden remarkable. Pulling in a powerhouse with no blood or mentor-disciple ties as a stable supporter over the years, wasn't that impressive? Being a sect leader wasn't just about who had the highest cultivation level, but about such maneuvers. That's why Long Qing greatly respected LV Baden and also wanted to learn from him. While chatting, LV Baden started to talk about the past, how he once disguised himself as a medicine slave to serve as Gu An's assistant, when neither knew the other's identity, and that's how they formed a bond. Each time he talked about these past events, a smile would slip onto LV Baden's face. Unable to help himself, Long Qing spoke up. The words he said, "Maybe he was guiding you on how to be a better sect leader. After all, how could he not know your identity?" LV Baden paused momentarily, and then chuckled, shaking his head. "Indeed. But he could have chosen someone else, yet he chose me, who had made mistakes. His broad-mindedness is unimaginable." When I think about it, as long as one doesn't commit heinous crimes, he always provides an opportunity for redemption. This is also my principle for being a sect leader. Is this person beyond redemption? Must this person be expelled from the sect? I'll make a decision once I've thought it through. Long Qing found this reasonable and silently noted down these words. They hadn't noticed that a figure was approaching the entrance of the third Medicine Valley. Ever since the supporting Dao Sword Venerable left, the Supreme Sect had not sent disciples to guard the Medicine Valley. It used to be out of fear of disturbing the supporting Dao Sword Venerable, not to protect the valley's safety. Thousands of years had passed, and while disciples still remembered the legend of the supporting Dao Sword Venerable, the vast majority knew nothing of his connection with the Third Medicine Valley. Now that disciples entered and exited the Third Medicine Valley, no one would stop them. The man in white who entered the Third Medicine Valley had a black cloth tied around his waist with a treasure sword at his side. His long hair was casually tied behind his head, with strands on either side of his face fluttering like willow catkins, reaching down to his chest. He was very handsome, and the female disciples he passed couldn't help but take extra glances. His expression indifferent, he observed his surroundings while walking deeper into the valley. Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of him. It was Candle Star from the battle court. Candle Star sized up the man in white and squinted, asking, "Who might you be?" Candle Star was secretly shocked. He was the profound yuan-free immortal, yet he couldn't discern this man's cultivation level. The man in white looked at Candle Star and asked in return, "Are you Candle Star from the battle court?" Upon hearing this, Candle Star's brows furrowed deeply, surprised that the stranger recognized him. "Just who are you? I'm not here for you, nor will I interfere with your plans." The man in white interrupted Candle Star, his words cold. He then moved past Candle Star and continued on his way. His gaze quickly settled on Long Qing. Candle Star stepped in front of him again, his voice cold. "Then who are you looking for? How can I be sure you won't mess with my plans if you don't explain yourself clearly?" The man in white answered, "I'm looking for Long Qing, your disciple. I won't harm him. I'm just here to give him a warning, and what I have to say has nothing to do with your schemes." Having said that, he moved forward again, this time shouldering past Candle Star. This shove made Candle Star even more wary of him. This man was very strong. Candle Star watched as the man in white headed toward Long Qing, hesitated for a moment, and decided to follow. Clang! The sound of a sword being drawn suddenly echoed, and the tip of the blade was abruptly at Candle Star's throat, causing his pupils to dilate. So fast. He hadn't even seen how the man in white had drawn his sword, and this sword was no ordinary sword. Chapter 522, Celestial Dragon Dharma Aspect, Breaking Destiny. Feeling the sharpness at his throat, Candle Star asked in a deep voice, "If you don't explain your origins, I can't possibly let you get close to him." The man in white glanced at Candle Star, his sword-raising hand perfectly straight, like a bridge, making Candle Star feel he was hard to reach. Although wary of the man in white, Candle Star was not yet at the point of fear. For the sake of entering the World Gate, how much effort had he exerted to obtain such an opportunity? How could he give up now? "My identity cannot be revealed, otherwise it will harm both him and you. You just need to know that the sword in my hand can diminish your Dao fruit," the man in white said with an indifferent look in his eyes. As his words fell, a terrifying sword intent instantly locked onto Candle Star, causing the gaze of profound yuan-free immortal to lose its luster. The man in white turned and sheathed his sword, continuing to walk towards Long Qing. Candle Star stood dumbfounded in place, his body trembling slightly. The clash between the two was not hidden. Many disciples saw the man in white draw his sword against Candle Star, yet they did not act rashly, for they all knew that Candle Star was the strongest existence in Medicine Valley. Even the Valley Master held great respect for him. The Third Medicine Valley of today did not possess the cohesion of 1,000 years ago. Most disciples were merely passing through, at least they would not risk their lives for Long Qing. Noticing the approach of the man in white while chatting with LV Bayan, Long Qing's gaze fell upon Candle Star. He saw Candle Star rooted to the spot, body trembling, gaze vacant, clearly not in a proper state. Just as he was about to speak up, the man in white suddenly arrived in front of him, startling Long Qing into a reflexive step back. Snap. The scabbard pressed on Long Qing's shoulder, rendering him immobile. Long Qing's eyes widened, a look of disbelief crossing his face. LV Badian beside him also reacted, instinctively wanting to make a move against the man in white, but was subdued by a single glance from the man. Faced with the man in white's gaze, LV Badian felt as if had entered another dimly lit world, surrounded by dense treasure swords pointing towards him, sending shivers down his spine. He felt as if moving even an inch would result in colliding with a sword, creating a suffocating and terrifying sensation of being unable to move at all. In reality, Long Qing did not fall into an illusion realm, but facing the man in white he felt no less pressure. The scabbard on his shoulder felt like a majestic mountain, such that he couldn't muster his mana. Long Qing stared at the man in white and asked in a deep voice, "Who are you, and do we have a grudge?" After Guan left, he didn't always stay in the Third Medicine Valley either. Sometimes he would venture out for experience, having met countless people. But he could be certain he hadn't provoked such a formidable being. The only thing he could think of was his bloodline. If a strong being like Candlestar could not resist this person, then surely this being was not from the celestial spirit great world. The man in white studied Long Qing, and after a long time, with no immediate response, his eyes betrayed a hint of disappointment. Such a look made Long Qing uncomfortable, a sense of inexplicable anger rising in him. The man in white spoke, "You're more disappointing than I imagined. You need not be nervous, I won't harm you. There's no one in this world more trustworthy than me." Heh! Long Qing gave a hollow, humorless laugh. The man in white continued, "My surname is Long as well, you understand now, don't you?" At these words, Long Qing's eyes widened in astonishment. Suddenly, Candlestar appeared beside Long Qing, reaching out to grab the scabbard of the man in white. "Wait, let him finish," Long Qing said in a low voice, his eyes fixed intensely on the man in white. Candlestar had just broken free from the illusion technique. He hadn't heard what the man in white had just said. He turned his head towards the man in white, his eyes full of shock and wariness. The man in white withdrew his hand, and Candlestar followed by releasing his grasp, watching as the man planted his treasure sword into the ground. As the scabbard struck the earth, the surrounding environment underwent a drastic change, and they found themselves in a dark world. Looking around, the ground was covered in sword shadows, all plunged into the earth. "What a powerful domain," Candlestar muttered to himself, his eyes sweeping around as a storm of amazement churned within him. The man in white stared at Long Qing and said, "My name is Long Jun, son of Emperor Longxin, your ancestor. I have glimpsed your entire life in the past. Although much is obscured, I can generally deduce your future path." Candlestar's face drastically changed, his eyes brimming with shock. Long Qing was also greatly startled, silent, gazing dumbfounded at Long Jun. "In the future, you will lead the supreme sect to unify the celestial spirit great world, but you will ultimately die at the hands of the war court." Long Jun continued, his gaze shifting to Long Qing, "You will be possessed by the silent destruction god emperor." Long Qing's heart pounded wildly. Long Jun then turned his eyes toward Candlestar and said, "You will be forged into a Taoist soldier by the lord of the war court, your will eternally subjected to torture." Candlestar's face turned ghostly pale as if he had realized something. Long Qing gritted his teeth and asked, "The Long clan has been annihilated until only I remain. You say you're my ancestor, why didn't you take action?" Long Jun looked at him with a deep and distant gaze, "Because my current fate is worse than death. What you see is not me from this moment, but from the past. This is a method I left before being captured, hoping to help the Long clan escape its destiny." Long Qing couldn't comprehend his words and involuntarily glanced at Candlestar. Candlestar furrowed his brows and asked, "Do you mean that you have traveled here from the past or projected yourself here?" Long Jun said, "If it's too hard to understand, don't dwell on it. What's most important is how to resolve the impending calamity. If the silent destruction god emperor succeeds in possessing you, he might indeed gain the powers of my grandfather." "Are you talking about Long Zhan?" "Yes, although I inherited his destiny pattern, In comparison to his bloodline power, it's really nothing, Long Jun answered. Long Qing recalled Candle Star mentioning before that Emperor Longxin's grandson had also inherited the talents of Celestial Dragon Emperor Long Zhan. He opened his mouth, intending to ask, "Isn't Emperor Longxin's grandson Long Jun's son?" As if seeing through his confusion, Long Jun replied, "Yes, my child also inherited this bloodline power. It was precisely because of it that the Long clan met with disaster. He is already dead, and I am still alive only because my father told me the stories of my grandfather. Since childhood, I have hidden my talents, but my child was born during the prime of the war court, and he was reckless." Long Qing felt dizzy from the information, and Candle Star was equally shocked, rapidly contemplating. Long Jun looked at Long Qing and said, "To break the Long clan's fate, you need to practice a divine skill." Long Qing frowned and asked, "Which divine skill?" "The Celestial Dragon Dharma aspect. This skill will allow you to conjure the Dharma aspect of people with whom you share a blood connection to fight alongside you." "Even if I master it, won't their strength depend on my cultivation level?" asked Long Qing, frowning. He instinctively resisted, feeling the divine skill came at great cost. "No, the strength of the conjured Dharma aspects will be solely based on their own cultivation levels when they were alive. The difficult part is to conjure them. This is a skill created by my father, reportedly inspired by my grandfather. He said my grandfather's skill was even more powerful, but unfortunately I have never witnessed it," Long Jun explained. "What's the price to learn this skill?" asked Long Qing, taking a deep breath. Long Jun replied, "It will cost you a lifetime. You may bear offspring before exercising this power and then sacrifice yourself to break the Long clan's fate. That's the only way." "Only way?" Long Qing's brow furrowed, and for some reason, his thoughts turned to his master. Did his master leave because of his fate? But if that were the case, why would senior sister Anxin ask on behalf of his master if he was willing to follow? Long Qing looked up at Long Jun and asked, "Then do you know my master?" Chapter 523, The Strength of the Long Clan, Your Master? Long Jun frowned, his tone revealing confusion as his gaze shifted to Candle Star, and he asked, "Besides him, do you have any other masters?" Upon hearing this, Long Qing and Candle Star exchanged a glance. Long Jun actually didn't know about this. What did that imply? Did it mean that Gu An's Dao practice exceeded Long Jun's? It could also mean that Long Jun truly might be from the past, for if he were a man living in the present, it would be impossible for him not to know the name of supporting Dao Sword Venerable. Seeing their expressions, Long Jun immediately raised his hand and began to calculate with his fingers. Candle Star suddenly relaxed, thinking that if Long Jun couldn't deduce Long Qing's backer, didn't that suggest the future might not be as he had seen it? His choice of Long Qing was not just because of Long Qing's bloodline but also because of Long Qing's background. In his view, why would supporting Dao Sword Venerable take action to shield all living beings from silent destruction God Emperor, if not to protect Long Qing? There were too many coincidences. Long Qing, pursued and hunted, receiving protection from a hidden great power, surely had unknown cause and effect. Long Qing broke the silence, asking, "If you're truly my ancestor, can you deduce how many members of the Long clan are still alive in the world?" As he grew older and more experienced, Long Qing wasn't foolish. He felt that his master had not just stumbled upon him by chance. Even if it was a coincidence, why would his master adopt him after seeing through his origins? No matter how he thought about it, he felt it was very likely that his master was also a member of the Long clan. Unable to deduce anything about Guan, Long Jun said, "I have calculated. There are only you and I." He furrowed his brows and hesitated before asking, "Could it be that you have another master?" "That's right. If he hadn't taken action, I would have died long ago," Long Qing replied. After hearing this, Long Jun's brow relaxed, and he mused to himself, "No wonder there are so many unclear areas." Long Qing no longer spoke further, instead beginning to weigh the divine skills Long Jun had mentioned. Even though he had another master to rely on, if that master was not from the Long clan, how could he drag his master into this predestined karmic retribution? No matter who your master is, I can confirm that he has no blood relation to the Long clan, and in the end, you must still bear the fate of our clan, Long Jun said to Long Qing with seriousness. He did not further inquire about Long Qing's master because he comprehended how vast the great Tao was due to his high realm. Recognizing that there is always someone stronger and that one can never be the strongest if they stop being captivated by the war court and not the strongest, it was normal for him to encounter people and matters he couldn't see through. He could at least be certain that Long Qing's master didn't harm Long Qing, and that was sufficient. Besides, he had met quite a few benefactors in his life. Long Qing fell into silence. Long Jun did not press further and instead looked towards the distance, his gaze wandering. Candle Star telepathically warned Long Qing not to agree, arguing that the war court might be strong, but there was still a way out. In his view, the fact that Silent Destruction God Emperor and the war court had not managed to capture Long Qing up to now was telling. Long Qing did not respond. Ever since Guan left, Long Qing had vowed to only make use of Candle Star and not trouble his master anymore. However, facing Long Jun, who had overwhelming strength compared to Candle Star, and knowing Long Jun's true self was suppressed by the war court, what could he rely on if he gave up the Celestial Dragon Dharma aspect? Most critically, the Celestial Dragon Dharma aspect could summon the ancestors of the Long family. Whether in a previous life or in this one, he had always longed for the Long clan at the height of its power. He wanted to know just how strong the Long clan had been to bring such suffering upon him for an entire life. The greater the hardships, the more he anticipated the capability of his own bloodline. If he could fight alongside the ancestors of the Long family, even at the cost of his life, it would be worth it. He had lived long enough and tasted both the bitterness and the joy of the human world. It was time to pursue what he had never attained before. Taking a deep breath, Long Qing's gaze fell upon Long Jun, and he declared, "I am willing to cultivate the Celestial Dragon technique." Long Jun immediately revealed a smile, looking at him with a change in his eyes. Candle Star wanted to persuade further, but Long Jun waved his sleeve and sent him flying. At the same time, another person was watching them. It was Guan, who was far away in the Taoist field of the beginningless. Guan could feel that Long Jun indeed had the bloodline of the Long clan and that he had a strong, intricate karma. It was as if he did not belong to this world. He had forced his way in, and the heavenly Tao wanted to expel him. From the sword domain displayed by Long Jun, his cultivation level should be at the perfection realm of the heaven-encompassing free immortal. This sword domain is the rudimentary form of the Tao fruit world. When the sword domain is becoming a world, that will be the time Long Jun enters the innate golden immortal stage. However, judging by what Long Jun said, his future had already been suppressed, so his current realm wasn't so important. Even if Guan were to give him guidance now, it would likely be very difficult to change his fate. Of course, Guan would not guide him, as his karma lies in the past. To interfere with the past would only court more trouble in the present. Guan was puzzling over one thing now. How was Long Zhan's lifespan evolution ability passed on to the descendants? He suspected there was another cause. Perhaps the Silent Destruction God Emperor and the War Court simply mistook the son of Long Jun to have inherited Long Zhan's capabilities, thereby asserting the bloodline of the Long clan as special. Regardless, Long Jun was, after all, Guan's grandson. Though he was a reincarnation body, he could not simply ignore that. Very well. Now, he had one more reason to deal with the War Court. In fact, without initiating an attack, the War Court would continue to pester him, but now that he had an unavoidable reason to make a move, he was even more determined to confront the War Court. Under the tree, Guan took out the Fate Pen and the Infinite Sword Book. There were many ways to kill an enemy. That was what he would do next, wait for Long Jun to reveal the Lord of the War Court's name. As for the Celestial Dragon Dharma aspect mentioned by Long Jun, Guan did not take it seriously. Long Zhan did discuss the creation of the Celestial Dragon Reincarnation Dharma aspect in its early stages with Long Xian, but Long Xian did not actually learn the true Celestial Dragon Reincarnation Dharma aspect. Guan would also occasionally cultivate this divine skill, and he had been able to summon the reincarnation body. Long Zhan, Xianxia, Lu Han, Ji, Black Profound Emperor, and others, each had their own talent. Someday, when Guan waved his hand grandly, and the reincarnation body appeared in front of him, that moment would be terrifying, and even he himself could not judge. In the future, he would continue to undergo lifespan reincarnation, which meant the celestial dragon reincarnation dharma aspect could only become increasingly more powerful. Seeing Long Jun start to transmit divine skills, Gu-en withdrew his divine sense and continued to sleep. He prepared to dream with the experiences of Ji, to roam the great Tao worlds of the future. To comprehend the past, to pursue the origin of the great Tao, to roam the future, was also to pursue the direction of the great Tao. Long Jun took up residence in the Third Medicine Valley, hiding his real name. As he stayed longer in the Medicine Valley, the disciples began to call him the Senior in White. He would occasionally guide the direct disciples of Long Qing in their cultivation, but more often, he would play Go with others in the dojo established by Gu-en, contemplating the Tao in the game of Go. In a blink, 10 years quickly passed. One day, Long Jun came to the heaven-repairing platform of the outer sect city. Having just arrived at Supreme Sect, he had heard of the legend of the supporting Tao sword Venerable, but previously his attention had been focused on Long Qing. Now he understood that Long Qing's mentor was the supporting Tao sword Venerable, who had saved the celestial spirit great world on many occasions, which piqued his curiosity about the supporting Tao sword Venerable. Today, he would experience the supporting Tao sword Venerable's sword intent. He, too, was a sword cultivator. As he just stepped onto the heaven-repairing platform, his face suddenly changed, he furrowed his brows, and then stepped forward. Thousands of years had passed, yet the heaven-repairing platform was still crowded with people. Anyone who came to the Supreme Sect wanted to feel the mythical heritage of the sect. Passing through the crowd, Long Jun came to the heaven-splitting axe. Standing beside the heaven-splitting axe, Zuijin glanced at Long Jun. Seeing his extraordinary bearing, he assumed he must be a great cultivator. But even with such a guess, Zuijin was not polite and with a wave of his hand, said, "Go back and line up." Chapter 524 Acceptance of Sword Tao, Queuing? Long Jun's gaze shifted towards Zuijin, his eyes expressing indifference. He didn't speak but turned and walked toward the end of the long queue. This small interlude did not draw much attention. Nowadays, encountering great cultivators with extraordinary bearings at Supreme Sect wasn't rare, let alone those who did not queue. However, with Zuijin present, the order would not be disrupted. Zuijin's impartial and strict way had earned him immense prestige. Of course, there were those who disapproved of him, but after inquiring privately, none dared to cause him trouble because he had inherited the legacy of supporting Tao sword Venerable, making him almost a disciple. With such a status, Supreme Sect was more than willing to raise him to the heavens. It took barely an hour before Long Jun's turn arrived, which was considered quick since Zuijin didn't waste words and allowed a quick go. Zuijin stared at Long Jun. He always felt there was something extraordinary about this man. Although he didn't think the other could lift the heaven-splitting axe, he was eager to see what the other could do. In the long years spent guarding the heaven-repairing platform, how tedious it had been. Yet Zuijin endured, believing that his actions would move the supporting Tao sword Venerable. What he aspired to was far beyond ordinary people's imaginations. Even his descendants couldn't understand. Why keep guarding after the supporting Tao sword Venerable had departed? Long Jun approached the heaven-splitting axe, his right hand grasping the handle. He just wanted to feel the power of the supporting Tao sword Venerable. He had no intention of actually pulling out the axe, nor did he want to ruin anyone else's opportunity. Although he heard that the supporting Tao sword Venerable was strong, he didn't think he was stronger than himself. Yet, as soon as he held the heaven-splitting axe, his brow instantly furrowed. So heavy, it felt like he was not holding the axe, but the entire celestial spirit great world. From the very first touch, he realized he couldn't lift the axe. The supporting Tao sword Venerable's cultivation level was higher than his current level. Golden Immortal Tao Fruit. A storm surged in Long Jun's heart. Such a strong individual guarding Long Qing. What could be his intention? Before, he didn't care, but now that he realized the supporting Tao sword Venerable was stronger than he had imagined, he couldn't help but ponder more. Where there's a cause, there's an effect. If the supporting Tao sword Venerable was merely optimistic about Long Qing or acted out of compassion, Was there a need to protect Long Qing so vehemently? After offending the battle court, why didn't the supporting Dao sword venerable sever all connections with Long Qing? Long Jun's brows furrowed tightly as he fell into deep thought. Zuijian, on the other hand, grew impatient and said, "If you can't pull it out, leave. Don't waste time." Upon hearing this, a glint of cold light flickered in Long Jun's eyes, giving Zuijian an inwardly startled feeling, as if he faced the horror of death for an instant. Fortunately, Long Jun didn't take it up with him and turned to leave. Zuijian heaved a sigh of relief, looking at Long Jun's departing figure with fear, yet with increased curiosity. On the other hand, far in the Taoist field of the beginningless, Guan was secretly pleased. Luckily, he had strengthened the power inside the heaven-splitting axe in advance, for if this youngster had managed to lift it, there would have been chaos. Long Jun did not belong to this era. By obtaining the heritage of the heaven-splitting axe, it was equivalent to seizing the opportunity meant for Guan's descendants. Plus, if he took the power of the axe back to the past, it could cause trouble for Guan. Everyone is striving to become stronger. I'd like to see what kind of struggle you will all end up in. Guan, reading inside his house, had his mouth curled into a smile as he muttered to himself. Zhu, she was practicing the Taoist unique venerate skill under the guidance of the Immortal Seeker. Liu was learning Sword Dao from the Sword Annihilation ancestor. Long Qing was following Long Jun in practicing the Celestial Dragon Dharma aspect. And there was an Hao, still comprehending the power of the Celestial Dao Golden Core. One day, these four individuals would clash, possibly even impacting the power dynamics of the world. No, these four already represented different forces. Guan also had to intervene, not for anything else, but to prove that following him was indeed the best path. Guan, thinking of the delights, beamed even more brightly. Spring went and autumn came, 30 years flitted by in a flash. North Sea Mountain Ridge. Inside a valley. Sitting in meditation on the grass, Long Qing opened his eyes, and as he stopped practicing, the wind and waves in the valley ceased, with the floating flowers and plants gradually returning to tranquility. He frowned and looked up at Long Jun not far away. Long Jun was sitting on a grass heap, holding his treasure sword, his eyes revealing a faint sadness, seemingly lost in thought. "Ancestor, why can't I ever fully comprehend it?" Long Qing spoke up, having practiced the Celestial Dragon technique for decades without finding the key to its entry, which also delayed his qi absorption cultivation for decades. He was thinking of giving up. Without lifting his eyes, Long Jun said, "It's not so easy, don't be impatient. Once you master the Celestial Dragon Dharma aspect, your cultivation level will rise like the tide." Just as Long Qing was about to speak again, suddenly, an immense aura surged from afar, shocking the entire great heaven and earth, so powerful that even mortal spirits could feel the terrifying pressure. Long Jun looked up, a sharp light flashing in his eyes. Unexpectedly, there is such sword intent in this world. Long Jun pondered thoughtfully. Long Qing also looked in the direction the aura was coming from, but he was not surprised. Every few decades or centuries, there would always be a powerful aura erupting, either from a great power battling or from someone coming out of seclusion. He looked back at Long Jun, hoping to gain some enlightenment from the ancestor. However, before he could speak, Long Jun vanished into thin air. Long Qing couldn't help but sigh. Long Jun always appeared and disappeared unpredictably, never instructing him on how to practice the Celestial Dragon Dharma aspect. For some reason, he suddenly thought of his master, who also disliked giving personal guidance. Could it be that his comprehension was not high enough? Thinking this, Long Qing's mood sank. On the boundless wasteland, Liu in black clothes was holding the Nine Extremes Sacred Heart Sword, his body surrounded by powerful sword qi, which caused his long hair to float and sway wildly. So powerful, Liu's face showed surprise and delight. He had just reached the loose immortal realm, and his sword intent had increased so much? He couldn't help but look toward the Sword Annihilation ancestor standing in the distance. The Sword Annihilation ancestor was looking at him, stroking his beard and saying, "This Sword Dao originates from the Sacred Heart Sword Dao, but it is still far from the true Sacred Heart Sword Dao. However, it is enough for you to dominate this shattered Great Thousand World. The Sword Annihilation ancestor was satisfied, even pleasantly surprised with Li Ya's cultivation progress. How strange. This lad seemed very ordinary at first glance, only with some fate connected to the supporting Dao sword venerable enabling him to reach this point today. Why did he find it so easy to cultivate the Sacred Heart Sword Dao? It wasn't clear if it was a misconception of the Sword Annihilation ancestor, but he felt it wasn't that Li Ya's comprehension was outstanding, but rather that the Sacred Heart Sword Dao was willing to accept him. Li Ya was unaware of the Sword Annihilation ancestor's thoughts, becoming immersed in his own strength, unable to extricate himself. Just then, a figure suddenly appeared beside him, startling the Sword Annihilation ancestor enough to swiftly move in front of Li Ya. It was Long Jun. Long Jun stared at Li Ya, his gaze peculiar. The Sword Annihilation ancestor looked at Long Jun, his brows tightly furrowed, and asked in a deep voice, "What does your excellency intend to do?" Long Jun's speed was too fast, so fast that the Sword Annihilation ancestor could tell he was no match for him. Li Ya was also startled by Long Jun, instinctively raising his sword, but when he saw Long Jun he was momentarily confused. For some reason, there was a slight resemblance to Guan in Long Jun's features. Upon closer inspection, it wasn't similar. Li Ya cursed to himself, feeling that he was being absurd once more. He tried his best not to think about Guan, fearing it would lead to laxity. "Senior, may I ask what brings you here?" Li Ya asked neither servilely nor overbearingly. Long Jun asked, "Where does this sword Dao come from?" Li Ya replied, "Sacred Heart Sword Dao. Has Senior heard of it before?" Seeing how tense the Sword Annihilation ancestor was, Li Ya felt panicked inside, but he had to maintain composure on the surface. If the other party wanted to kill him, with the speed displayed, he wouldn't even have time to react. Perhaps he wasn't an enemy. Chapter 525. The Matter of Creating the Universe, Sacred Heart Sword Dao? Long Jun pondered the name of this swordsmanship, his eyes flickering as if he had thought of something. Sword Annihilation ancestor pulled Li Ya behind himself and then faced Long Jun, with a sword intent emanating from him that changed the color of the celestial vault. Thick clouds rolled in at great speed, swiftly darkening the skies. Long Jun came to his senses, looked at Sword Annihilation ancestor, and said, "Your sword Dao is strong, but you don't seem to be here in your original body." Upon hearing this, the Sword Annihilation ancestor's face showed a subtle change. Clang! Long Jun drew his sword, its blade hovering near the Sword Annihilation ancestor's neck. He drew his sword so quickly that the Sword Annihilation ancestor couldn't react in time. Li Ya was also frightened and immediately raised the 9 Extremes Sacred Heart Sword, standing alert. Who would have thought that after so many eras, the Supreme Demon Realm would still be clinging on to life? My sword intent can make it all the way to your true form. Do you believe me? Long Jun said indifferently, making the Sword Annihilation ancestor's complexion even uglier. Li Ya clenched his teeth and asked, "Who exactly are you and what do you want? Could it be that you're after my sword Dao?" Long Jun glanced at him and said, "I am also a sword cultivator, merely attracted by your sword Dao. However, it seems that you are merely Dao thieves. Whatever your schemes, remember, do not commit acts of world slaughter, or you will never recover." With that, Long Jun sheathed his sword, ready to leave. Li Ya wanted to ask more, but was stopped by the Sword Annihilation ancestor. To think that the heaven-encompassing free immortal could act so oppressively. A sneering laugh resounded, instantly dropping the temperature between heaven and earth. Long Jun narrowed his eyes and looked up, his gaze filled with murderous intent. Deep in the ocean, the hidden spirit palace. Guan lay on a rocking chair, holding a book in his hand. Deep sea dragon Carp, Chen Luo, and Su Ling were meditating beside him, all practicing their divine skills. This kid, Guan saw Long Jun fighting with one of the Silent Destruction God Emperor's subordinates and felt his actions were a bit over the top. Knowing that the Silent Destruction God Emperor was involved with the battle court, how could Long Jun still dare to expose himself? Guan previously thought that he was just here to transmit divine skills until Long Qing was trained and would then leave. Unexpectedly, Long Jun was so impetuous. Could it be that this kid had other plans? Guwen became interested in this battle. He wanted to see how Long Jun would wrap things up. The subordinate of the Silent Destruction God Emperor also had the cultivation level of a heaven-encompassing free immortal, considered the most formidable among the Silent Destruction God Emperor's followers. He and Long Jun battled with the power of their realms and did not affect the celestial spirit Great World. In Li Ya's eyes, the two did not make a move, merely standing off against each other from afar. In reality, they clashed countless times in an instant, their power manifesting within their realms. Whether it was the Silent Destruction God Emperor's subordinate or Long Jun, both were cautious in their actions. They weren't wary of each other but of the strongest being that suppressed the celestial spirit Great World. In the end, the Silent Destruction God Emperor's subordinate left with his tail between his legs, and Long Jun disappeared as well. This battle would undoubtedly reach the ears of the Silent Destruction God Emperor, and Guwen wanted to see how he would react. Guwen planned to break through after reaching a lifespan of 100 billion years and then deal with the Silent Destruction God Emperor. Until then, he did not want the Silent Destruction God Emperor to act rashly. Clearly, the Silent Destruction God Emperor was also wary of him and had not taken action against Long Qing just yet. And so, Guwen maintained his wait-and-see attitude. Several months later, the Silent Destruction God Emperor began to make his move. He transformed into a Taoist and made contact with the Sword Annihilation Ancestor and Li Ya. He was actually interested in the Sacred Heart Sword Dao as well. Could it be that Long Jun did it on purpose, wanting to shift the Silent Destruction God Emperor's attention to Li Ya? With Long Jun's Dao practice, he could certainly have foretold of Li Ya's past. Even if he couldn't see through Guwen, he would likely be aware of Li Ya's experiences by deducing from what others said. To know that Li Ya received Guwen's inheritance would not be difficult. So, you want to use me to go up against the Silent Destruction God Emperor? Thought Guwen as he was quietly picking medicinal herbs. He wasn't angry. After all, Long Jun was his grandson, and Long Jun's scheming was also for the sake of protecting Long Qing. However, if Long Jun could see through the cause and effect of Li Ya's life, then the Silent Destruction God Emperor could do the same. The Silent Destruction God Emperor did not force his hand against Li Ya. Instead, he offered divine skills in exchange. The divine skills he brought forth even tempted the Sword Annihilation Ancestor, and ultimately, the Silent Destruction God Emperor joined Li Ya in understanding the Sacred Heart Sword Dao. Guwen felt this was truly a twisted fate. He was irreconcilable with the Silent Destruction God Emperor, yet the God Emperor had good relations with both Hao and Li Ya. The cause and effect of this world is truly complex. No matter how high one's realm is, they are always entangled with karma. Under the cosmic starry sky, the celestial Tao golden core continues to burn, its radiance seeming eternal. In front of the celestial Tao golden core, young Immortal Emperor slowly stood up, with Hao meditating beside him, also opening his eyes and looking up at him. We can't wait any longer. The destiny of great heaven and earth is being divided. If this goes on, the destiny of the Immortal dynasty will eventually be eroded. Young Immortal Emperor murmured to himself. The conflict between the Immortal dynasty and the Holy Court continued to this day, with the destiny of both sides growing. However, in reality, young Immortal Emperor could feel the presence of an outer heaven being infiltrating both the Immortal dynasty and the Holy Court. With just one miracle, the destiny of both powers could be usurped. Indeed, this was the case. After his 1,000-year seclusion, the Immortal dynasty needed someone to take charge, which presented many opportunities for the forces beyond heaven. He could sense that there was a presence within the Immortal dynasty stronger than himself. This made him hesitant to reveal himself, for fear of exposing the location of the celestial Tao golden core. And Hao frowned at young Immortal Emperor and said, "With your current cultivation level, to accomplish that task, I fear it might be." Young Immortal Emperor looked at the celestial Tao golden core and said, "Before the great calamity arrives, the highest realm in great heaven and earth was the Zizai Immortal realm, which indicates that great heaven and earth could only create a free immortal. Now that I have surpassed the free immortal, it's not impossible for me to achieve it." And Hao asked, "If you fail, what then?" Young Immortal Emperor glanced at him and said, "Then it's up to you to do it." And Hao's expression remained calm as he replied, "If it's up to me, after my success, the Immortal Dynasty won't be the supreme power of heaven and earth. I'm well aware, but my failure signifies that the destiny of the Immortal Dynasty has come to an end. What you must do is to protect the living beings of great heaven and earth." After saying this, young Immortal Emperor stepped toward the celestial Tao Golden Core. And Hao stood up and watched as young Immortal Emperor entered the celestial Tao Golden Core, its raging flames quickly engulfing him. This scene filled Hao with a sense of expectation. He was also curious whether young Immortal Emperor, with his realm, could accomplish such a feat of creating heaven and earth. As young Immortal Emperor's figure completely vanished into the celestial Tao Golden Core, the golden flames of the celestial Tao Golden Core suddenly came to a halt. Elsewhere, within the Taoist field of the beginningless, in front of a waterfall, Guwen was painting with Shenzhen when he suddenly felt something and looked up, frowning. Shenzhen glanced at him, and seeing him looking up, she followed suit. Just as she was about to ask what was happening, her pupils dilated. Above the blue sky, a sun appeared out of nowhere, growing rapidly in size. Not just they, but creatures all over great heaven and earth saw this spectacle, sparking discussions among all beings. A vast pressure enveloped heaven and earth, quieting it. Shenzhen couldn't help but ask, "What is that?" Guwen replied softly, "The ruler of the Immortal Dynasty, young Immortal Emperor. And the celestial Tao Golden Core." Shenzhen, surprised, asked, "Young Immortal Emperor? What does he intend to do?" Guwen didn't hide anything and answered, "He wants to restore the Great Thousand World to its original state." Chapter 526. The existence representing the will of the heavenly Tao young Immortal Emperor appeared above the celestial Tao light layer, transforming into a radiant sun, allowing all living beings to witness his brilliance. His vast mana had already enveloped the entire great heaven and earth and even extended into the depths of the universe. Behind him, fierce flames converged into the form of a celestial Tao golden core. This golden core was even more enormous than the seven suns above the celestial spirit great heaven and earth. Figures flew out from heaven and earth, looking at young Immortal Emperor with fear. Yet faced with young Immortal Emperor's imposing presence, no one dared approach him. Who is he? The Lord of the Immortal Dynasty, young Immortal Emperor. What is he trying to do? Such a powerful aura. How high is his Tao practice actually? He hasn't gone into demonic possession, has he? It doesn't seem good. Could it be that he is going to make a move against the Holy Court? The cultivators of the Immortal Tao discussed among themselves, unease swelling in their hearts. Facing the ever-increasing aura of young Immortal Emperor, no one dared to make a sound. Far away in the Supreme Sect, Long Qing also looked up at this scene. When Candle Star appeared beside him, he couldn't help but ask what this anomaly was. The Lord of the Immortal Dynasty seeks to use the power of the heavenly Tao to restore the shattered Great Thousand World to its original state, that is, to bring the various great heaven and earth together, Candle Star said with a serious face. Young Immortal Emperor, who was merely at the Taoist Zhang Zizai immortal realm level, exhibited an aura that even made him, the profound Yuan-free immortal, tremble with fear. Upon hearing this, Long Qing felt shocked, and at the same time, a greater confusion arose in his heart. He further inquired, what good is it to bring the great heaven and earth together? Far away in the Taoist field of the beginningless, Shenzhen also asked Guwen this question. Guwen replied, when the heavens and the earth merge, destinies will also merge, allowing those who contend for the destiny of heaven and earth to have more destiny. Also, from the perspective of the heavenly Tao, this is indeed a good method. The current constant catastrophes are because the celestial spirit great heaven and earth has reached its limit of endurance. The heavenly Tao hopes to alleviate the pressure on heaven and earth. Moreover, other heaven and earths in the universe are successively encountering massacres, many of them are even devoid of life. At this time, all the heaven and earth combined, the new heaven and earth will have stronger endurance. Perhaps the beings of the celestial spirit great heaven and earth can thus avoid a catastrophe and welcome a new era. Having previously discussed the will of the heavenly Tao with Shenzhen, she couldn't help but admire young Immortal Emperor after hearing this. So, is he acting for the sake of all living beings? Shenzhen remarked. The endurance of heaven and earth was insufficient, and most people thought of reducing the number of beings to cross the tribulation, while young Immortal Emperor thought of expanding heaven and earth, enhancing their endurance. He not only dared to think but also dared to act. Guwen, looking at the bright sun in the sky, said softly, "He indeed has the heart to protect all living beings, but more so, he is compelled to act." He could see that the Immortal dynasty had already been controlled by outsiders. Wasn't the Holy Court the same? On the surface, it was the Saint Minister holding power, but in reality, there were outsiders infiltrating it, not to mention people like Silent Destruction God Emperor who could overturn the Saint Minister's power at any moment. Compelled to act? Shenzhen grew more curious, though she wasn't worried. Staying by Gu N's side, she gradually adopted an attitude of watching the mortal world with a light heart. She knew that with Guwen by her side, she would not be swept into human conflicts. She was more curious about the heavenly Tao and the causalities of the world, for Guwen had said that everything possessed the implications of the great Tao. Guwen said no more. He was waiting for the outcome for young Immortal Emperor. As time passed, other great heaven and earths in the universe also began to be shrouded by the oppressive force of young Immortal Emperor, and more great heaven and earth began to tremble, with those closer to the celestial spirit great heaven and earth moving towards it first. The movement of heaven and earth was a catastrophe for the beings within them. Mountains trembled, rivers churned, and more mortal spirits within those great heaven and earth died. At the core, the celestial spirit great heaven and earth did not face disaster but was under the pressure of the heavenly Tao, which made beings feel suppressed. Guwen, seeing that the entities in the Tao fruit realm of the celestial spirit great heaven and earth did not act, speculated in his mind. Yet, the native strong forces of other great heaven and earth could not just sit back and watch. Free immortals came one after another, wanting to stop young Immortal Emperor. Unfortunately, before the celestial Tao golden core, the power of the free immortals appeared so insignificant. Time rapidly moved forward. Eventually, even the Taoist Zhang Zizai Immortal made a move against young Immortal Emperor, but still, they couldn't shake young Immortal Emperor's actions. From then on, the great powers from various great heaven and earth fled in panic, no longer daring to obstruct young Immortal Emperor. One day, the celestial spirit great heaven and earth lost its night. When the hour came, heaven and earth remained in daylight. Inside the Taoist field of the beginningless, everyone gathered to discuss young Immortal Emperor's actions. Guwen lay on a chair, holding a book, seemingly unconcerned. He was not uninterested, he just knew the time hadn't yet come. 7 more hours had passed. Suddenly, the universe began to tremble as a sector of the great heaven and earth collided with the celestial spirit great world. The worlds began to converge, and the celestial Tao destiny was aiding in their fusion. The young Immortal Emperor, standing upon the celestial Tao light layer, revealed a smile. The first step was successful. He had thought the Tao fruit realm experts lurking within the celestial spirit great world would stop him, but those people did not show up. If one world could merge, merging the remaining worlds was just a matter of time. His anxiety began to dissipate. The situation had been dangerous, but there were no mishaps. However, he hadn't noticed that, in the cosmic darkness above his head, a pair of gigantic eyes had opened. These eyes were seen by all beings of the universe, and every viewer was utterly terrified. What is that? My God, am I seeing things? Could it be another heavenly demon attack? Those eyes are bigger than the sun. How high must their cultivation level be? It's over. I've heard we were born during the era of transition for the universe. I never expected it to be true. The beings were frightened, and even the people within the Taoist field of the beginningless were discussing those eyes. The young Immortal Emperor clearly heard the discussions of the universe's beings. He looked up and was greatly startled by those eyes. Confronted with these indifferent cosmic eyes, the young Immortal Emperor felt ice cold. His soul was trembling. And how, staying within the mysterious little world, also saw those eyes through the celestial Tao golden core. He too was frightened, harboring ominous thoughts. Just as the young immortal emperor was about to speak, a terrifying figure wielding a great axe swung at him from behind, shimmering with intense light. The young immortal emperor caught a glimpse of him from the corner of his eye, his pupils dilated. Boom! With one strike of the axe, the young immortal emperor was annihilated in an instant, and the sun, manifested by the celestial Tao golden core, also evaporated. After executing the young immortal emperor, the celestial spirit god also disappeared. The giant eyes overseeing the universe slowly closed, as if they had never appeared. The entire universe suddenly became silent. The beings did not know what had happened, but seeing those eyes appear and the mysterious great sun disappear led them to various speculations, yet their anxiety lingered for a long time. Candle Star stood beside Long Qing, letting out a sigh. Long Qing, unaware of the events transpiring beyond the heavens, turned to look at Candle Star and asked, "What did you see?" "I saw the will of the heavenly Tao." Candle Star spoke solemnly, then turned and walked away. The intervention of the celestial spirit god shocked the great cultivators of the world. Had the mighty young immortal emperor really fallen just like that? Guan also marveled at the power of the celestial spirit god. His Tao practice was indeed profound and inscrutable, and his actions were supremely domineering, allowing no one to explain themselves. No wonder those Tao fruit realm beings from beyond the heavens didn't stop the young immortal emperor. Perhaps they had long known of the celestial spirit god's principles. This great thousand worlds fragmentation seemed to be directly related to the celestial spirit god. Now, Guan was curious about something else. Having witnessed the death of the young immortal emperor, what would and how do next? Chapter 527. 100 trillion years lifespan breakthrough before the celestial Tao golden core. And Hao stood still, his expression vacant as he continuously recalled the formidable figure of the celestial spirit god in his mind. He finally understood what kind of terrifying existence stood behind this cosmic catastrophe and also finally realized why the celestial Tao golden core had urged him to flee. Facing such a powerful being, how many years would he have to cultivate before he could contend with it? He had spent thousands of years with the young immortal emperor, often exchanging insights about the heavenly Tao, and the fall of the young immortal emperor had also deeply touched him, who had experienced the celestial Tao reincarnation. In the midst of the unknown, who exactly controlled everything? At the same time, others felt as conflicted as in Hao. The immortal seeker and Zhu Shi stood on a cliff, looking up at the celestial vault. Zhu Shi had already recovered her past lives' memory. Although her cultivation level had not yet returned to its peak, her divine sense was now capable of glimpsing beyond the outer heaven. "It's him," Zhu Shi murmured softly. Once, she had traversed the universe, pushing the celestial demon race back to the outer heaven, and had also seen the figure of the celestial spirit god, transient as a flash, which had caused a tremendous impact on her then seemingly invincible self. It was precisely for this reason that she chose to hide in reincarnation to comprehend the great Tao. Go to Wuxia world. Sight being the strongest in one realm, yet not the strongest in the universe, she was well aware that such a status would inevitably lead to an end sooner or later. The immortal seeker said with emotion, "He's become stronger than before." Zhu Shi turned to look at the immortal seeker and asked, "You know him?" The immortal seeker answered, "There's some history." Zhu Shi suddenly felt the immortal seeker was hiding something from her, and that obtaining the heaven and earth Tao fruit would be more difficult than she imagined. She might even face the mighty one she had just thought of. Thinking of this, she grew worried and wondered whether she should give up on the heaven and earth Tao fruit and stay away from the immortal seeker. The news of the young immortal emperor's demise spread like the wind throughout the celestial spirit great world, and the information about the adjoining of another great world to the celestial spirit great world caused a huge stir everywhere. An unprecedented change was coming to the human world situation. However, these changes did not affect Gu An's life, who continued to insist on gathering medicinal herbs to accumulate his lifespan. With the merging of the two great worlds, more and more cultivators started going to this new world for training, which, to some degree, lessened the fights. That great world, not as strong as the celestial spirit great world with far fewer beings, could only submit in the face of invasion by various sects from the celestial spirit great world. Against such a backdrop, over 600 years swiftly passed. On this particular noon, Guwen was in the mountain god temple in the North Sea mountain ridge, gathering medicinal herbs, maintaining the form of the mountain god with an opera mask covering his face. His actions suddenly froze. Your lifespan has broken through 100 billion years for the first time, activating the lifespan breakthrough function. Lifespan breakthrough. You can consume lifespan to obtain options for breakthrough locations that pose no threat to you and are suitable for your current realm. Both traveling to and from these locations will consume a certain amount of lifespan. This function? Guwen felt this function would be very helpful to him. As his realm continued to rise, the commotion caused by his breakthroughs would also increase. At the very least, it was no longer suitable to make them in the celestial spirit great world, which could easily lead to trouble. He didn't want anyone to know his realm, including those around him, so his breakthroughs had to be secretive. This is a real ripoff. From now on, selecting a breakthrough location will consume lifespan, activating a lifespan barrier will consume lifespan, and even improving Taoist technique will require lifespan. Guwen exhaled deeply, yet he felt quite happy inside. Although he was using up lifespan in more and more ways, it also made him more secure. Lifespan, after all, could be accumulated through medicinal herbs. Although he could find a breakthrough location on his own, there would always be accidents. Guwen began to look forward to his next breakthrough. He didn't use it right away, preferring to finish gathering the medicinal herbs from the mountain god temple first. Once today's tasks were done, he could make his breakthrough. Guwen's mood became joyous, and he began to hasten his motions. After a while, profound mysterious Jinren walked down the mountain path and came to Guwen's side, with a teapot in hand. Guwen, transformed into the mountain god, seemed like a porcelain figurine in his presence. Mountain god, the great heaven and earth has become even vaster. Now, the achievements of young Immortal Emperor are widely celebrated. What do you make of it? Profound mysterious Jinren asked softly. Although the young Immortal Emperor had fallen for hundreds of years, living in the deep mountains, profound mysterious Jinren received news of the outside world very slowly and had only recently learned why the young Immortal Emperor had perished. The young Immortal Emperor had tried to aid all beings in the great heaven and earth in overcoming a great calamity by trying to unite various heavens and earths, ultimately meeting celestial punishment. Such actions were worthy of admiration. Even though profound mysterious Jinren didn't understand how the heavens and earths were to unite, in an age of power struggles, he deeply revered a ruler like the young Immortal Emperor who would make sacrifices for all beings. Profound mysterious Jinren wanted to become such an unparalleled hero, to die for all beings. What a thrill it would be. Just thinking about it filled him with a fiery passion. Guwen replied, he indeed achieved great deeds, and it's a pity he died. The young Immortal Emperor had once spent many years in the Third Medicine Valley, and Guwen had a good impression of him, but this impression was not enough for Guwen to take the risk of protecting him against the celestial spirit god. Not everyone can be a savior, but before the savior emerges, many precede them in sacrifice, their actions awakening the will of all living beings. The death of the young Immortal Emperor had incited the indignation of the beings of great heaven and earth. With the major sects fanning the flames, the intervention of the celestial spirit god left the leaders of these sects in despair, unclear about the nature of the world they inhabited. What hidden schemes lay behind the celestial spirit great world? More and more people felt that this world was a prison they couldn't escape, and the calamities seemed more like some powerful force compelling them to slaughter each other, making their lives seem laughable. If death was inescapable, what was the purpose of pursuing the immortal Tao? Now that profound mysterious Jinren had reached the cultivation level of the Nirvana realm, and after entering the immortal Tao realm, his confusion grew, and he knew that the so-called immortal Tao realm was still far from the omnipotence of the immortal gods. He looked at Guwen, yearning to ask, have you repeatedly saved all living beings and yet avoid public attention because you know the hidden truths of great heaven and earth? He held his tongue. He was afraid of courting misfortune through careless speech. Guwen walked forward and said, "Nothing in this world is ever permanent, not even the power that seems supreme at the moment." Profound, mysterious Zenran's eyes shifted upon hearing this. He sensed another meaning. The mountain god was also dissatisfied with the forces behind great heaven and earth, even possibly wanting to overthrow them. Profound, mysterious Zenran felt a fire ignite within himself, deciding that he would practice harder from now on, to one day stand shoulder to shoulder in battle with the mountain god. Guwen heard his heart's voice, feeling helpless and amused. "I was just trying to comfort you." An hour later, Guwen left the mountain god temple but didn't head straight back to the North Sea mountain ridge. Instead, he stepped into the woods of another continent. Standing under the shade of the trees, he began to use the lifespan breakthrough function. You have activated the lifespan breakthrough function. Based on your current realm, we have selected the following breakthrough locations for you. 1. War Spirit Holy Mansion. 2. Netherworld Deep Sea. 3. Celestial Extreme 9 Heavens. Path of the Great Tao. Tao Source Ancestor Tree. Guwen initially thought there would only be 3 options since lifespan reincarnation had only 3, but he didn't expect the lifespan breakthrough to present 9 choices. The names of these places alone felt significant. Had it not been for the hints that these places held no danger for him, he wouldn't dare to venture there. Of course, there was no danger for him now, but that might change once he started the breakthrough, which meant that he would have to activate the lifespan barrier. Chapter 528. Breakthrough to Balancing Heaven. Golden Immortal Realm Perfection. Guwen looked at the 9 options before him, sinking into contemplation. These names all seemed good, but some places were forbidden. The War Spirit Holy Mansion wouldn't have anything to do with the battle court, right? Netherworld Deep Sea is out of the question. The land of reincarnation is also very dangerous. The ghost immortals of the 9 Divine Mansion are terrifying. It would be troublesome if encountered. The Path of the Great Tao, that's the cosmic space beyond the world gate, linking the different Great Thousand Worlds. Who knows what one might run into? Guwen began to weigh his options. Judging by the names was indeed difficult. His current cultivation level was not enough to deduce the origins of these place names. Clearly, these places were not part of the celestial spirit great world. They were located beyond the world gate. He pondered and pondered. Guwen decided to break through in the celestial extreme 9 heavens. With a thought, he immediately made his decision. Transferring to celestial extreme 9 heavens will cost 10 billion years of lifespan. Continue? 10 billion years? Wouldn't that be 20 billion years of lifespan back and forth? Guwen's brows furrowed. He had guessed that the lifespan breakthrough would be costly. After all, it was a lifespan function that was enabled by 100 billion years of lifespan. The consumption of lifespan would definitely be huge. Go to Wuxia world. Sight, but he had to break through. The remaining 80 billion years of lifespan should be enough for his breakthrough. Now he could only hope that this place of breakthrough was worthy of the lifespan he was about to spend. After a moment's hesitation, Guwen chose to continue the transfer. As soon as the thought settled, he felt an irresistible force envelop him. He didn't feel uncomfortable but rather felt an indescribable sense of profound mystery. His eyes involuntarily closed, and his senses went numb. After a while, Guwen felt his feet touch the ground. His senses returned to normal in an instant, and he opened his eyes, his pupils dilating. What entered his sight was a boundless sea of clouds, the sky a deep blue, so high it made one feel the vastness of the great heaven and earth, and one could only feel an infinite awe standing in it. Guwen opened his mouth, filled with shock. Such dense Tao spiritual qi. The Tao spiritual qi here was denser than that in the universe outside the celestial spirit great heaven and earth, and purer too, without a hint of impurity. Guwen felt that the 10 billion years of lifespan were well spent. He immediately activated the lifespan barrier to prevent the passing of other powerful beings. The lifespan breakthrough would take him to a safe place, but it didn't mean this place would always be safe. After the lifespan barrier was activated, Guwen's heart finally settled. One must be cautious in an unknown land. Instead of breaking through immediately, he decided to meditate on the spot, soaking in the majestic sea of clouds. Celestial Extreme 9 Heavens, Could it be there were 9 layers of the sky? Guan thought as he spread his divine sense, rapidly expanding it. However, he found that the sea of clouds was much larger than he imagined. Most importantly, his divine sense could not penetrate downward because the cloud sea beneath his feet was bottomless, with some sort of great Tao power isolating all divine sense. He seemed to be in the sky, yet he was at the very bottom. After a good while, Guan's divine sense still could not probe the end of the sea of clouds. Could this sea of clouds be more vast than the universe he came from? The thought was so preposterous that Guan felt it was absurd, creating even more wariness towards the celestial extreme 9 heavens. Tao spiritual chi that was more dense and pure than in the universe, the space that was vaster than the universe. What kind of terrifying existence could such a place give birth to? Guan took a deep breath and tried not to think about it. He called up his attribute panel. Name, Guan lifespan, 6, 8, 15/90, 000, 000, 075 physique, primordial infinite body, cultivation level, innate golden immortal realm perfection, 900 billion years of lifespan, leave 100 billion for transmission, leave 50 billion for the lifespan barrier. That amounts to using 750 billion years of lifespan for the breakthrough. Should be doable, right? The last time Guan tried to cross the tribulation, each failure cost him 50 million years of lifespan to attempt again. This time it won't take 100 million years, will it? If it really does take 100 million years of lifespan for one tribulation attempt, then Guan has 750 chances. No big deal. It's just not good to go for an all-round improvement first. Well, let's widen the gap in realms first. There's plenty of time to improve Taoist techniques later. No matter what Guan chooses, there are pros and cons, but overall, he has been on a steady path to becoming stronger, and that's the right direction. Guan looks at his cultivation level and directly invests 100 billion years of lifespan. A series of prompts quickly pop up before his eyes. You have practiced Qi absorption cultivation for 100 billion years. You forcefully attempt to break through to the heaven-balancing golden immortal realm using the great achievement of the great Tao great freedom as you wish Bible. You begin to cross the tribulation. You do not survive the celestial Tao 3 flowers void great tribulation. The tribulation has failed. You have practiced Qi absorption cultivation for 200 billion years. You forcefully attempt to break through to the heaven-balancing golden immortal realm using the great achievement of the great Tao great freedom as you wish Bible. You begin to cross the tribulation. You do not survive the celestial Tao 3 flowers void great tribulation. The tribulation has failed. Heaven-balancing golden immortal. As expected, it takes 100 million years for one tribulation attempt. Guan adjusts his mentality and starts to anticipate how strong the heaven-balancing golden immortal will be. Finally, all the prompts drop, and there's still no success in crossing the tribulation. Invest another 100 billion years. Guan stares expressionlessly at the prompts. After failure, continue. 100 billion years of lifespan. Another 100 billion years of lifespan. Finally, the prompts before Guan start to change. You have practiced Qi absorption cultivation for 56 billion years. You forcefully attempt to break through to the heaven-balancing golden immortal realm using the great achievement of the great Tao great freedom as you wish Bible. You begin to cross the tribulation. You survive the celestial Tao 3 flowers void great tribulation. The tribulation has been successful. Your cultivation level has broken through to the early stage of Hengtian golden immortal realm. You have practiced Qi absorption cultivation for 100 billion years. Your cultivation level has increased. Finally, the breakthrough is successful. Guan lets out a sigh of relief. No matter how many years of lifespan are spent, as long as the breakthrough is successful, it's worth it. He doesn't stop there but chooses to continue investing lifespan. One breath to rise to balancing heaven golden immortal realm perfection. In the end, he still had over 280 billion years of lifespan left, leaving 100 billion for transmission back. The remaining over 180 billion years of lifespan couldn't possibly get drained by the lifespan barrier. Gu's mood becomes joyful, his lips curl up in a smile. The mighty Tao spiritual chi floods into his body. As always, the lifespan barrier extracts Tao spiritual chi and Tao rules in an unpredictable manner. making it impossible for the outside world to discern where the source lies. The sea of clouds in Gu En's vision begins to churn more and more magnificently. As the Tao spiritual qi enters his body, Gu En feels an unprecedented comfort. His physique, from the outside in, everything is being purified. He gradually closes his eyes, immersed in this extreme pleasure, unable to extricate himself. The boundless sea of clouds becomes more turbulent, majestic and powerful. With no living creature's figure sweeping through, this world seems to have only the sea of clouds. Insights about the heaven-balancing golden immortal realm begin to burst forth in the depths of Gu En's mind. His golden immortal Tao fruit also undergoes changes. Within the lifespan barrier, Gu En emits a colorful strong light all over, barely revealing his figure. Tao spiritual qi enwraps him like flood dragons, with faint streaks of flowing light, which are the Tao rules in motion. A long while. Suddenly, the sea of clouds at the horizon lifts, like a huge wave wanting to envelop the sky, or as if some enormous creature is about to break out, instilling fear in all who see it. Chapter 529 Nine Heavens Immortal Emperor Giant waves of clouds surged unknown tens of thousands of feet high, creating a boundary across the endless sea of clouds that resembled an insurmountable heavenly wall, majestic and inviolable. Gu En, who was in the midst of a breakthrough, opened his eyes and felt an overwhelming aura. Indeed, the celestial extreme nine heavens surely harbored divine creatures, and they were beings incomparable to those of the celestial spirit great world. As the sea of clouds at the horizon dispersed, Gu En saw a giant eagle's head, a black eagle, the diameter of whose eyes alone exceeded tens of thousands of feet. It seemed like a divine spirit beyond the heavens, peering into the trivial matters of the lesser worlds. Safely within the lifespan barrier, Gu En wasn't afraid. He sent his divine sense towards this eagle. Celestial Extreme Divine Eagle, late stage of innate golden immortal realm 38,009,982, 763/5, 000 000 000 000 000/5, 000 000 000 5 trillion years of lifespan? An existence that had lived for 38 billion years. Late stage of innate golden immortal realm. Gu En was still shocked by the celestial extreme divine eagle despite his ongoing attempt to break into the heaven-balancing golden immortal realm. The first being he encountered in the celestial extreme nine heavens was an innate golden immortal. This sparked a ludicrous conjecture in his mind. Could it be that the lowest realm of beings residing here is also at least an innate golden immortal? Go to Wuxia world. Sight he thought this to be quite likely since he could sense the eagle's terror. This colossal divine eagle emitted a powerful oppressive aura that could easily instill fear, yet Gu En could feel its fear. The reason it only popped its head out was also due to fright. Sure enough, after probing its head, the celestial extreme divine eagle retreated back into the sea of clouds, causing a tumult of fog and waves, magnificent and tempestuous. After the eagle disappeared, Gu En closed his eyes and continued to perceive the realm of heaven-balancing golden immortal. As the Tao fruit began its transformation, his divine sense also improved. Even without extending his divine sense outwards, the scope of his heart-eye's vision expanded. The so-called heart eye was the vision Gu En saw without deliberately thinking about the exterior when his eyes were closed. This heart eye was miraculous, not consuming his energy or attention, as if it were an innate talent. His vision within the heart eye was rapidly expanding, even surpassing the previous range of his divine sense. With the passage of time, Gu En finally stepped into the realm of heaven-balancing golden immortal. His Tao fruit became stronger, manifested not only in increased mana and senses but predominantly in the Tao fruit world. Now, if he were to establish a Tao fruit world, it would be more stable and refined, even enabling him to harness the power of the Tao fruit world for combat. At will, he could create a world larger than the celestial spirit great world. The spiritual energy of this world derived from his mana. He was essentially the Tao fruit world itself. This further confirmed to him that the celestial spirit great thousand world was indeed the Tao fruit world of some supremely powerful entity. If all the great heaven and earth from the universe were to be gathered, it was unknown how vast they would be, but the potential size of Gu An's Dao fruit world was also unknown. He hadn't established it yet, and his cultivation level was still increasing, making the Dao fruit world he could establish ever larger. After reaching the early stage of heaven-balancing golden immortal realm, the speed at which he devoured Dao spiritual qi increased, and he continued to push towards a higher realm. As Guwen reached the middle stage of the heaven-balancing golden immortal realm, the boundless sea of clouds churned tumultuously. He seemed to sense something and opened his eyes again. He looked up and saw a figure appear in the sky, a woman in a white feathered dress, standing on a bed of 7-colored clouds. Her features were so delicate, seemingly the most perfect creation both within and beyond the heavens, her beautiful face exuding an indifferent aura that overlooked all living beings, her long hair coiled under the silver jade phoenix crown, which resembled a silver forest housing a proud phoenix spreading its wings and looking down upon everything. Such a beautiful woman. Even though Guwen had experienced many memories of reincarnations, he was still astounded by this woman's visage. He immediately sent out a lifespan detection, but could detect nothing. That meant she was not her real body but a manifestation of some divine skill. The white-dressed woman stood on the cloud, watching the turbulent sea of clouds, her expression indifferent like water, inscrutable to anyone trying to discern her thoughts. Guwen couldn't see through her cultivation level, so he felt somewhat cautious. After about the time it takes one stick of incense to burn, the lady in the white dress suddenly vanished like smoke, and the 7-colored clouds under her feet dissipated as well. Guwen took a deep breath. As expected, the lifespan barrier was reliable. He closed his eyes and continued to feel his own destiny. Unlike the land of reincarnation and silent extinction domain, Guwen felt a clearer connection to the Dao rules while making cultivation breakthroughs in this place. This came as a pleasant surprise to him. 5 trillion years of lifespan had not been wasted. Even though he was also breaking through in the land of reincarnation, reaching the stage of a heaven-balancing golden immortal here, the degree of improvement in Gu N's power would be different. The Dao rules here were just so pure and rich. Moreover, by breaking through here, Guwen wouldn't affect the universe where the celestial spirit great world was located, meaning that neither the celestial spirit god nor the powerful entities lurking in the shadows would notice anything unusual. This meant he could continue to survive more securely. Continuous breakthroughs. Late stage of heaven-balancing golden immortal realm. Perfection of heaven-balancing golden immortal realm. When Guwen reached the perfection realm, he felt that his mana, physical body, senses, heart-eye, soul, Dao fruit and all else reached another level, making him feel that everything was different. Suddenly, he opened his eyes and looked into the distance where a distant battle was occurring. The distance was as far as from the world gate to the celestial spirit great world. Incredibly far, where the sea of clouds churned, still within the celestial extreme 9 heavens. He saw a man in silver armor fighting a transformed demon. That transformed demon, appearing like a flood dragon, retained its draconic horns and wielded dual blades. Each move was full of dominance, and its demonic power was at the level of a heaven-balancing golden immortal. The man in silver armor was also at the heaven-balancing golden immortal realm, and because they possessed such cultivation levels, their fight wouldn't be disturbed by any tumult caused by Guwen. The two seemed to have a deadly feud, fighting fiercely. The man in silver armor exuded an aura that reminded Guwen of the celestial spirit god as well as celestial Dao immortal gods. Could this person also be a celestial Dao immortal god? The man in silver armor wielded a long spear, each thrust containing the mystery of divine skills. If they were to battle within the celestial spirit great world, any side's great heaven and earth wouldn't withstand his divine power. With Gu An's current cultivation level, he couldn't determine who would win or lose. Because the distance was too great for the naked eye to reach, Guwen could only perceive using his heart eye or divine sense, unable to use lifespan detection. As Guwen focused his heart eye on the divine figure and the demon, he could hear their conversation. Celestial extreme god, do you truly wish to have a fight to the death with this emperor? Eliminating demons and slaughtering devils is my duty. The phenomena in the 9 heavens have nothing to do with this emperor. Then why are you here? This emperor simply wished to visit the 9 heavens immortal emperor. She isn't someone you can meet. Enough talk, prepare to die. The man in silver armor's attitude hardened, determined to slay the great demon. 9 heavens immortal emperor? Gu En instinctively thought of the lady in the white dress he had encountered earlier, his intuition telling him that this was the title of the lady in the white dress. At his level, any intuition was not random guesswork. It must be due to a tight causality linking the name of the 9 heavens immortal emperor to the image of the lady in the white dress that he could make such a judgment. Chapter 530. Laws of the World. Gu En watched the battle unfold while he waited for his cultivation level to become completely stable. During this process, the battle between the man in silver armor and the mysterious great demon in his eyes gradually slowed down. The Tao rules of the celestial extreme 9 heavens were indeed rich, providing great benefits for Gu En, and his aptitude in the way of cause and effect also greatly improved. At that moment, he even considered relocating the Taoist field of the beginningless to the celestial extreme 9 heavens. Of course, he merely thought about it. While the celestial extreme 9 heavens were appealing, they were even more dangerous. So far, he hadn't seen any beings in the celestial extreme 9 heavens with a cultivation realm lower than that of an innate golden immortal. The beings here could easily extinguish the inhabitants of the Taoist field of the beginningless with a single breath, and he suspected that those of lower realms could not survive in this world. They could easily be crushed by the power of the great Tao unless they stayed inside the dojo. After a long time, Gu An's cultivation level finally stabilized. He looked at his remaining lifespan. He still had over 190 billion years left. It was not perilous, a steady breakthrough. Would you like to expend 10 billion years of lifespan to teleport back to the previous location? Gu En stood up, his gaze stretched far into the distance, where the distant battle seemed not to have yielded a winner. Looking in other directions, he saw no traces of other beings. He silently chose yes, and then his figure vanished from the spot. Go to Wuxia world. Sight once again, a familiar, peculiar sensation assailed him, and his senses plunged into darkness. After a while, his feet touched the ground again. He opened his eyes and found himself back in that forest, now under the veil of night. His heart eye instantly captured the entire world, spreading quickly, and his heart followed, settling down. He did not leave but continued to observe the universe, aiming to capture all the great heaven and earth within it and imagining the combined size of them. In the universe, there were more than 1,000 great heaven and earth and many little worlds, but even so, all combined seemed quite small in Gu En's eyes. He felt that now he could create a Tao fruit world that was larger than the celestial spirit great world before it fractured, indicating that his cultivation level had already surpassed that of the former master of the great world. This was to be expected. After the fragmentation of the celestial spirit great world, free immortals roamed the universe freely, making Taoist Xianxia immortal exceptionally rare, indicating that the celestial spirit great world wasn't as exaggerated as Gu En had thought before it broke apart. Gu En then looked towards the celestial spirit god under the world gate, similar to the celestial extreme god he met at the celestial extreme 9 heavens, with the cultivation of a heaven-balancing golden immortal, yet far from reaching the perfection realm. Finally, Gu En no longer felt pressure when facing the celestial spirit god. A smile appeared on his face, his mood becoming even more cheerful. Even though his cultivation level surpassed the celestial spirit god, Gu En did not immediately plan to act against the celestial spirit god since there wasn't deep enmity between them, and there was clearly a much larger force behind the celestial spirit god. He would deal with the silent destruction god emperor first. That individual schemed against the Long clan and him, creating an irreconcilable deadly feud. The celestial spirit god, at most, differed in stance, acting out of their duty, not because of Gu En, whereas the silent destruction god emperor acted out of self-interest. Gu En stepped forward, enjoying the night scenery of the forest. The tiny insects in the dark appeared so vivid. Their world was also vivid, bearing similarities to the world humans lived in. Busy with survival, entwined with cause and effect. Great thousand world, great heaven and earth, Little World, and the world of insects. All these worlds had their strengths and weaknesses, but all followed a set of rules. In the darkness, a mantis slowly emerged from beneath a leaf, creeping closer to a cicada. At dawn, the sunlight broke through heaven and earth. Between the mountains lay a lake, enshrouded in fog, resembling a paradise from the human world. Leah stood by the lake, holding the Nine Extremes sacred heart sword, his gaze fixed on a man in black robes in the distance, his hair disheveled, resembling an evil demon. The man in black robes was actually the transformation of the silent destruction god emperor, who was pondering the ways of the sacred heart sword Tao. Leah had always been wary of this man, but the sword annihilation ancestor dared not drive him away. This man even taught him divine skills, so he could only endure in silence. Watching the man in the black robe enthralled, Leah was very curious. What was this man's background? What was he scheming? Why did he want to study the sacred heart sword Tao but not go to the river of sword Tao? The sword annihilation ancestor had once taken Leah to the river of sword Tao. The splendor and dazzle of it had left Leah with unforgettable memories. He really wanted to visit the river of sword Tao again, but the sword annihilation ancestor said that with his cultivation level, he could not stay long in the river of sword Tao. He wondered if junior brother Gu had ever been there. Suddenly, Leah thought of Guwen. Although Guwen had revealed his true identity, in his heart, Guwen would always be his junior brother. It wasn't that he wanted to take advantage, but he felt that the title of junior brother Gu made him feel closer. The supporting Tao sword venerable seemed too distant, and he only felt respect towards him. As soon as he thought of Guwen, Li Ya's lips involuntarily lifted in a smile. He and Guwen had grown up together, feeling that Guwen was not pretending. Perhaps Guwen in this life was just an identity of supporting Tao sword venerable's reincarnation. Because of this, he trusted that the Guwen in his memories was more real than the supporting Tao sword venerable. Suddenly, the sword annihilation ancestor appeared behind the silent destruction god emperor, and the two seemed to be communicating telepathically. Leah could not hear them, and soon, the two disappeared from the spot. Seeing this, Leah did not think further and continued practicing his swordsmanship. If he wanted to catch up to junior brother Gu, had become the world's top swordsman first. He did not notice that behind him at the top of the trees, Guwen was standing on the leaves, silently watching him. Mountains behind and mist rising from the lake, the scene was so aesthetically peaceful and serene. Guwen, having just achieved a breakthrough, thought of Leah, so he came to see him. Looking at Leah, he recalled the feelings and ambitions of their youth. One must not forget one's original aspirations. Reminiscing about the past occasionally could also make his heart more resolute. Guwen decided to wait until the silent destruction god emperor had completely passed down the divine skills to Leah, then he would take action against him. As for whether killing the silent destruction god emperor would provoke a stronger existence, he did not care, since the world gate separated them from other great thousand worlds. His intuition told him that the strongest in the battle court would not be much stronger than the silent destruction god emperor. Otherwise, the pursuit of Long Qing would not have been delayed until today. A breeze lifted Guwen's garments. A leaf fluttered up from beside him, spiraling toward the celestial vault. Seasons came and went. 30 years passed swiftly. Inside the Taoist field of the beginningless, Guwen watched LV Xian practice martial arts, with an Exen by his side, discussing the recent troubles faced by the Qingkuan sect. The Qingkuan sect was already the overlord of the Nine-Spirit continent, but its development always met with troubles. Over the years, an Exen frequently aided people like Yi Qingshan. Now, with an overseas sect targeting the Nine-Spirit continent and supposedly an old monster from the celestial and earthly immortals sitting within that sect. Celestial and earthly immortals were considered legendary to the Qingkuan sect, and even an Xian could not handle them. They could only rely on Guwen. Guwen, staring at LV Xian, spoke softly, "You can help the Qingkuan sect, but don't help them expand their territory. If a great cultivator breaks into the continent, then you can make your move." An Exen pouted, helplessly saying, "Master, is whether I intervene the point? I can't beat them." Chapter 531, Legend, extinguished by one hand upon hearing Enzin's words, Guwen pulled the fate pen that was tucked at his waist and handed it to an Exen. An Exan was stunned, holding the fate pen and looking at Guwen with confusion. She'd seen Guwen carry this pen often and was accustomed to its presence, yet since she had not felt any fluctuations of spiritual power from the fate pen, she never thought of it as a magical treasure. "You can use it for now, and I will refine a magical treasure for you later," Guwen said, his gaze fixed on Xian, his tone casual. Having been with Guwen for a long time, an Xian wouldn't hold back her questions, and she quickly asked, "But how do I use this?" As she spoke, she lifted the fate pen in her hand and waved it through the air, but there wasn't even ink. "When you encounter someone who must be killed, it will show its power," Guwen answered, which made an Xian look forward to using the fate pen. She knew that Guwen wouldn't play tricks on her. This pen was surely powerful. She immediately bowed in respect and then left with the fate pen. Guwen turned his head to watch an Exan, his eyes filled with profound meaning. Having helped people like Xianxia and others for so long, she had gradually become accustomed to it. Although it had not affected her own cultivation, in her heart, Xianxia and the others were like her disciples. Not all relationships in the world were perfect. Should there come a day when Xianxia and the rest pass away, she hoped she wouldn't take it too hard. However, this was also an inevitable experience for those on the path of immortal cultivation. It couldn't be said to be good or bad, but experiencing all human emotions could shape one's Dao heart. Go to Wuxia world. Sight after an Xian had left, Xian opened his eyes and asked, "Master, what exactly is this divine skill?" "It doesn't seem like a divine skill, it's very mysterious, and even though I am cultivating, I can't clearly describe its profound mysteries." After entering the Taoist field of the beginningless, Xian started to address Guwen as master, and Guwen did not refuse since their relationship hadn't reached the level of brotherhood before. Guwen looked up at the celestial vault and said, "Indeed, it's not a divine skill. Once you master it, you will understand what it is. It will help you dominate this part of the human world." Upon hearing this, Xian instinctively asked, "Just this part of the human world?" Guwen turned his head towards him, his smile ambiguous, and said, "Can your eyes contain the entire human world?" Xian was taken aback and could only offer an awkward smile. Guwen's gaze drifted into the distance, his face revealing a look of anticipation. It was finally coming to an end. Under the vast sky, peaks were emerging from the sea of clouds, and atop one of these mountains stood Liya, Sword Annihilation Ancestor, and Silent Destruction God Emperor side by side. Liya looked towards the Silent Destruction God Emperor and asked, "Senior, since you are about to leave, can you not reveal your true identity?" During the years of teachings from the Silent Destruction God Emperor, his reverence for him had only deepened. He even felt that the Silent Destruction God Emperor was not weaker than Guwen. With guidance from the Divine Emperor, he had not only mastered one divine skill but also gained a deeper understanding of the path to cultivation. Once, when the Silent Destruction God Emperor was away, he secretly asked Sword Annihilation Ancestor just how formidable the Divine Emperor was. Sword Annihilation Ancestor had said something that he couldn't forget. "Apart from Heavenly Tao, he is the strongest." He had asked at the time, how did he compare to the supporting Tao Sword Venerable? Sword Annihilation Ancestor just shook his head and said nothing. Afterwards, Liya clearly felt that Sword Annihilation Ancestor had become even more respectful towards Silent Destruction God Emperor, and he suspected the ancestor might have pledged allegiance to the Silent Destruction God Emperor as his master. He dared not ask too much. After all, before he became a disciple, Sword Annihilation Ancestor had mentioned that he bore a great cause and effect, and he didn't want to bear this burden prematurely. When you become powerful enough to roam the world invincibly and have set foot in outer heaven, living a carefree life, you will learn of my legend, the Silent Destruction God Emperor said, looking into the distance, his tone completely calm without a trace of emotion. What a poser! Liya thought to himself, yet he longed for such an attitude. How many more years would he have to cultivate before he could speak such words with confidence? Sword Annihilation Ancestor followed, saying, "I will do my best to train him to that level." "It doesn't matter," the Silent Destruction God Emperor said. "I don't care how high his achievements will be in the future. The divine skills have been imparted, and we are clear of debt and responsibility." With those words, the silent destruction god emperor stepped forward, his footsteps landing in the air as if an invisible path lay beneath his feet. Before Liya could even begin to marvel at the silent destruction god emperor's dominance, suddenly, a figure appeared before them. A hand pressed down on the silent destruction god emperor's shoulder, rendering him immobile. The pupils of the silent destruction god emperor suddenly contracted, and in an instant, his face was shrouded in dark energy. Dark armor enshrouded him as he transformed into his true form. Even so, he was horrified to discover that he couldn't break free. The mysterious palm on his shoulder suppressed his Dao fruit, halting everything within his Dao fruit world. Both Li Ya and the Sword Annihilation Ancestor were startled by the sudden appearance of the figure. The Sword Annihilation Ancestor wanted to speak, but an extreme terror pressed down upon him, leaving him unable to move or speak. Li Ya also experienced the suppression, but he wasn't panicked, because the figure of the newcomer was forever unforgettable to him. It was the supporting Dao sword Venerable. It was Guan, using the Demon Shadow Divine skill. Wrapped in dark purple demonic chi, Guan looked even more sinister than the silent destruction god emperor. He stood at the edge of a cliff, a single hand pressing down the silent destruction god emperor suspended in midair, preventing him from advancing further. All of heaven and earth seemed to quiet at once. "Your legend?" Guan's voice rose, and his right hand squeezed. The silent destruction god emperor was annihilated in an instant, turning into a wisp of black chi, which then condensed in Guan's palm. The powerful silent destruction god emperor was completely defenseless in Guan's grasp. Seeing the silent destruction god emperor being annihilated instantly, both Li Ya and the Sword Annihilation Ancestor's eyes widened. Guan turned his head. Although they couldn't see his face clearly, Li Ya and the Sword Annihilation Ancestor felt as if they were being seen through, especially the Sword Annihilation Ancestor, who was extremely fearful. A voice echoed in the Sword Annihilation Ancestor's mind, "You shall not utter a single word about today's events." With the voice's fall, Guan vanished into thin air. As he disappeared, the terrifying suppressive force also vanished. The Sword Annihilation Ancestor felt like a great weight had been lifted, but he was still shaking with residual fear. Liya stood still on the spot. The words of the silent destruction god emperor still echoed in his ears. Go to outer heaven to hear his legend. The legend, could it be extinguished by Guan? With a mere hand? Liya was caught in a shock. Only a moment ago, he had been inwardly convinced that the silent destruction god emperor was the only one who could possibly be stronger than Guan. And yet Guan had appeared and extinguished the silent destruction god emperor. At this moment, he even harbored a ridiculous suspicion. Could it be that Guan had heard his inner thoughts, and that's why he appeared? Then he dismissed this suspicion, thinking himself foolish to come up with such an absurd reason. He began to feel confused. What enmity did Guan have with the silent destruction god emperor? He turned his head to look at the Sword Annihilation Ancestor, and his expression changed accordingly. After so many years together, he had never seen the Sword Annihilation Ancestor show such a look. Fear, despair, relief, nervousness, and more. Seeing the Sword Annihilation Ancestor with such a complex and troubled expression, Liya felt as if something inside him had shattered. How could the master he revered be less formidable than junior brother Gu? He suddenly felt lost. Chapter 532, Ascending to Yellow Heaven, Emperor of Absolute Thought. Liya struggled to adjust his emotions. He looked at Sword Annihilation Ancestor, cautiously asking, "Master, are you all right?" Although the image of his master had collapsed in his heart, the many years of guidance were a kindness he could not forget. Sword Annihilation Ancestor came back to his senses. He took a deep breath and said, "I'm all right, but you must forget today's events, or it will bring about great trouble." He knew very well how terrifying the silent destruction god emperor was, and this one was the original entity. Having the capability to suppress the silent destruction god emperor so easily, the Tao practice of that being just now. Sword Annihilation Ancestor couldn't help but tremble. He even dared not think deeper. The pressure Liya felt was far less than that of Sword Annihilation Ancestor. He didn't feel that Sword Annihilation Ancestor was too cowardly. After all, Considering his relationship with Guan would definitely take care of him. Junior brother Gu sure knows how to scare my master, truly not giving any face. Liya felt emotional. He also couldn't help but wonder, just how high was junior brother Gu's cultivation level? How could such an unrivaled powerful existence be so easily defeated by junior brother Gu? Liya couldn't figure it out, he just couldn't understand. How many years had Guan cultivated, and how many hardships had he endured to become so powerful? Liya couldn't imagine. Go to Wuxia world. Sight Sword Annihilation Ancestor also couldn't imagine, even as a profound Yuan-free immortal, in his knowledge, apart from the celestial spirit god guarding the world gate, the silent destruction god emperor was the most powerful being. Previously, supporting Dao Sword Venerable had exterminated the incarnation of the silent destruction god emperor, and when the silent destruction god emperor himself arrived, it frightened supporting Dao Sword Venerable to leave the celestial spirit great world, undeniably proving the power of supporting Dao Sword Venerable. But now, Sword Annihilation Ancestor could accept the defeat of the silent destruction god emperor, but could not accept that the silent destruction god emperor had no power to fight back. The celestial spirit great world became a frightening place in the eyes of Sword Annihilation Ancestor. The once center of the great thousand world indeed hid unfathomable and terrifying cause and effect. He dared not be curious about who that being was, only hoping he could forget. Having lived for so many years, he knew very well that even without speaking, remembering certain things could also bring boundless trouble. On the other side, Guan had already returned to the Taoist field of the beginningless. The reason he spared Sword Annihilation Ancestor was firstly due to Li Ya's face, and secondly because he had ways to eliminate the cause and effect, ensuring the incident wouldn't be spread. He arrived in his courtyard, lying on a chair. He raised his right hand and flipped it open, revealing a black pearl, which was transformed from the silent destruction god emperor. The black pearl was not the true body of the silent destruction god emperor, but was suppressed by Gu and his power of cause and effect. Within the black pearl, the silent destruction god emperor was helpless, unable to escape, only to be handled by Guan. The silent destruction god emperor had possessed so many of the Long clan's juniors, Guan couldn't just kill him, he needed to understand the reasons. He began to soul-search the silent destruction god emperor. The flowers and grass in the courtyard slightly swayed, and sparrows chirped on the old trees, enhancing the liveliness of the courtyard. Shenzhen came back carrying a bamboo basket. She was in a good mood, humming a little tune she had heard from the folk. When she saw Guan admiring a black pearl, she couldn't help but ask, "What is the origin of the pearl in your hand?" She was just curious and didn't think much about it. Usually, Guan liked to fiddle with little gadgets, making others feel cultivation was easy for the highly skilled, with no need for daily practice. "I picked it up in the river," Guan casually replied. His heart, however, was filled with murderous intent. Through soul-searching, he saw the tragic conditions of generations of the Long clan's talented members. The lighter cases were possession, the severe ones endured endless torment, being tortured to death alive. The silent destruction god emperor was not reincarnated into the Long clan, but targeted the exceptionally talented disciples of the Long clan for possession, thus seizing their lives. If the possession failed, he would find ways to take their bloodline, making the victims endure unimaginable pain. As Guan had guessed, the silent destruction god emperor had indeed targeted the Long clan's bloodline because of Long Zhan. The divine emperor had noticed Long Zhan when he roamed the universe. He found Long Zhan's growth rate astounding, hence always kept him under covert observation. When Long Zhan crossed the 9 heavens of the immortal path, he felt threatened, thus making his move to execute him. Afterward, he took Long Xian as his disciple and assisted Long Xian in rebuilding the battle court, having a genuine mentor-disciple bond with Long Xian without ever attempting possession. Later, Long Xian was killed by a supreme being, and the silent destruction god emperor could not avenge him, which deeply provoked the silent destruction god emperor. Afterwards, Long Xin's grandson exhibited a talent no less impressive than Long Zhan's. He then became greedy, continuously searching and continually failing, making him more obstinate, eventually leading to a great disaster. The one who killed Long Xian came from ascending to Yellow Heaven, known as Emperor of Absolute Thought. In the memory of the silent destruction god Emperor, at that time, he had yet to reach the middle stage of the innate golden immortal realm. Facing the Emperor of Absolute Thought, he was completely powerless and only managed to escape by using a secret technique. After that, he never encountered the Emperor of Absolute Thought again, and he dared not venture to ascending to Yellow Heaven, which seemed to be a forbidden place to him. Besides, Guwen also learned about another existence. Immortal Emperor. This person was the Lord of the War Court, initiating the war that overthrew the power of the Long clan. He was also the longest ruling entity of the battle court, claiming he could be eternally immortal as long as a living being could chant his title, allowing him to resurrect. The silent destruction god Emperor was also wary of the immortal Emperor. The two never clashed. It's worth mentioning that the immortal Emperor was not interested in the Long clan spending years in seclusion. It was his offspring who, fearing the Long clan's resurgence, began the extermination. As Guwen continuously extracted memories, Xianxia sat on a nearby stool, quietly watching him. For some reason, she felt the black pearl in Guwen's hands had a not-so-simple origin. Moreover, Guwen's current state gave her an indescribable feeling of profound mystery. She felt like painting. Hence, she took out a palette and set it up in front of her, then hung up a sheet of paper and took out her ink and brush. Guwen noticed her actions but said nothing. Time quickly passed. After a long while, after Guwen finished plundering the memories of the silent destruction god Emperor, he clenched his right hand, shattering the black pearl. You have successfully seized the lifespan of the silent destruction god Emperor, middle stage of innate golden immortal realm, 415,098,273,628 years, 15 billion years of lifespan. Upon seeing this prompt, dark thoughts of slaying innate golden immortals arose in Guwen's heart. But he quickly suppressed them. To live to the innate golden immortal realm, one must surely not be ordinary. Like the silent destruction god Emperor, his master, close friends, and disciples were all extraordinary. Just killing him was manageable, as Guwen could erase the cause and effect, but if he killed too many, it would always lead to major trouble. Regardless, eradicating the silent destruction god Emperor resolved a great concern for Guwen. After that, he could fully enjoy life and watch his disciples grow. Guwen turned his head to look at Xianxia nearby, curious about the kind of painting she had created. He saw Xianxia holding the brush, her expression slightly blank, completely fixed in front of the palette, motionless. Guwen immediately stood up and walked over to her, making his way to her side, looking at the drawing paper with squinting eyes. The paper depicted a man with white hair and blood clothes, standing atop a mountain peak, gazing up at the sun, moon, and stars. Although Xianxia's drawing was not very clear, Guwen could recognize the person instantly. Long Xin's grandson, Long Jun's son, Long Mie. The character extinction in Long Mie was derived from the silent destruction god Emperor, who had visited him when he was just born. At that time, the silent destruction god Emperor hadn't yet realized Long Mie's talent. This scene in the painting had not appeared in the memories of the silent destruction god Emperor. After the silent destruction god Emperor captured Long Mie, and before he had attempted possession, they encountered a great Dao storm on the path of the great Dao, which obliterated Long Mie while severely injuring the silent destruction god Emperor. Chapter 533 Buddha Immortal. Could Long Mie be alive? Guwen gazed at the painting by Xianxia and speculated thus in his heart. Indeed, in the memories of the silent destruction god Emperor, he and the battle court were doing their utmost to slaughter the Long clan, yet descendants of the Long clan always managed to escape. Only when Long Qing came into the picture did the silent destruction god Emperor seem to hold some trepidation, beginning to observe secretly. Could it be that Long Mie was protecting the descendants of the Long clan from the shadows? As Guwen pondered this, he lifted his hand and gently patted Xianxia's shoulder. Xianxia suddenly snapped back to reality. Subconsciously, she turned her head to see Guwen, and upon recognizing him, she let out a sigh of relief. She spoke up, "Just now, I felt as if I'd fallen into some sort of magic barrier. I saw a person who kept staring at me. It was so frightening." During the conversation, She glanced over at her own painting, fear showing in her eyes for the first time. Guwen asked, "What else did you see?" Xianxia began to describe the magical barrier she had experienced. Below the mountains in the painting was a sea of blood with bones bobbing up and down, a sight so startling it was unbearable. The blood sea felt so oppressive to her that she couldn't bring herself to depict it. The man in blood clothes standing atop the mountain peak gave Xianxia an endless sense of desolation. Even though she couldn't see this man's past, she could feel the deep vengeance of the blood sea he bore and his lonely, unsupported existence. Go to Wuxia world. Sight listening to Xianxia describe the feelings Long Mie incited in her, Guwen sighed internally. It appeared the karmic resolution for the Long clan hadn't been completely settled yet. After Xianxia had finished speaking, Guwen said teasingly, "It seems your enlightenment could also bring about a heart demon. You'll have to be careful in the future." Xianxia nodded, but she was somewhat perplexed in her heart. She had been looking at Guwen when she painted this scroll, which meant the person in the painting likely had some kind of connection to Guwen. Seeing that Guwen didn't wish to speak, she refrained from asking more. Over the years, through Guwen's guidance, she had painted many pictures and was well aware that Guwen had an extraordinary background. Precisely because of this, she refrained from asking too much, so as not to cause trouble for Guwen. After chatting for a while, Guwen turned and went back inside. He still needed to reflect deeply on the memories of the silent destruction god emperor and contemplate when to make a move against the battle court. The battle court was created by his reincarnation body. Now that it had been usurped and was used for evil, he had to resolve this karmic thread. After watching Guwen return to the house, Xianxia's gaze fell back on the painting, her expression turning curious. How strange, why does he resemble Guwen somewhat? Xianxia mumbled to herself, suddenly forming a bold speculation. Could the man in the painting be one of Guwen's past lives? Thinking this, her heart suddenly felt uncomfortable. Guwen was always so kind to those around him, never losing his temper. He was always willing to shoulder the troubles of others, yet he himself had endured hardships unimaginable to ordinary people. Xianxia had always found Guwen to be great, able to treat people well, and even rescue all living beings. But as her realm grew higher, her admiration for Guwen only increased. Guwen always managed to refresh her view of him. Xianxia looked at the person in the painting, her gaze once again becoming unfocused. The yellow sand filled the sky, and the windstorm raged like raging floodwaters and ferocious beasts. An ancient temple lay amidst the sandstorm. Zhang Buku, his white hair tied behind his head, pushed open the main gate, entered the Buddha hall, and then proceeded to close the door. The Divine Exotic Realm Master and Divine Exotic Ghost Kings were meditating around the room, each one pale and weak, with the Divine Exotic Realm Master's face covered in bloodstains, looking very frightening. The Divine Exotic Ghost King known as Jin Ludao opened his eyes to look at Zhang Buku and asked feebly, "Have you found anything?" Zhang Buku shook his head and said, "It's endless and desolate, without a living soul. The sun overhead grows ever hotter, and at this rate, we will surely be refined away." As these words were spoken, the Divine Exotic Ghost Kings all opened their eyes. Damn it, now we're really screwed. I have been saying, we shouldn't chase after that immortal fate. It's unreliable, and given our unique powers, we can't act together. What's the use of saying this now? Master, at least say something. We can't just sit here and accept our fate. That bastard is definitely hiding in the shadows, waiting for us to be powerless to resist. If we fall into his hands, it will be worse than dying under the blazing sun. The Buddha hall fell into noisy chaos, but Zhang Buku had grown accustomed to it. He looked up at the large Buddha statue behind him, which was covered in dust and appeared so ancient. Ever since he had entered this temple, Zhang Buku had felt there was something off with this Buddha statue. Although the Divine Exotic Realm Master and the Divine Exotic Ghost Kings had all checked it, he still felt uncomfortable. He had the feeling of being watched by a malicious gaze. The Divine Exotic Realm Master noticed something wrong with Zhang Buku's expression and asked, "Are you okay?" Zhang Buku looked at him and shook his head. "I'm fine, but I feel there must be a deeper intention for that person leading us into this realm. It's probably not just to wait for us to die because we're no match for him now." As these words came out, the divine exotic ghost kings stopped their bickering and all turned to look at him. Zhang Buku took a deep breath and said, "My friends, on the way here, you all saw those Buddha heads in the desert, as if left there on purpose by some being, guiding us to this temple. Maybe our chance of survival lies within this temple." Hearing this, the divine exotic ghost kings all stood up, looking around. The divine exotic realm master thought it made sense and turned his head to observe the surroundings. Slowly, a heavy silence fell upon the Buddha hall. After a while, everyone's gaze was drawn to the large Buddha statue. Defying the 9 netherworlds, Anxious asked, "Do any of you feel something is off?" His words broke the silence, prompting the other divine exotic ghost kings to speak up, sharing their feelings as if the liveliness could drive away the unease in their hearts. Zhang Buku's pupils suddenly dilated, his eyes fixed on the large Buddha statue's eyes. Nearly touching the ceiling, the statue's face was shrouded in darkness, making its features blurry. Zhang Buku saw that its eyes were smiling. This sent a chill through his body, a fear arising instinctively in his heart. Soon, the divine exotic ghost kings quieted down too, as they also noticed the statue smiling a cold, evil grin, sensing a greed that seemed to emanate from it. They slowly gathered together, shoulder to shoulder. The divine exotic realm master stared at the large Buddha statue, took a deep breath, and asked aloud, "May I ask which senior rests here? If we have disturbed you, please show us a way out." As his words trailed off, the eyes of the Buddha statue twisted into 2 sly slits, all the more eerie. "Do you want the immortal fate? It lies right here." An eerily cold laughter rang out, making Zhang Buku and the others grow even more wary, pressing even closer together. Despite his fear, the divine exotic realm master asked in a steady voice, "We are willing to forsake the immortal fate. May I inquire if the senior will allow us to leave?" "Of course not." The voice drew out the last word before suddenly shouting loudly, startling the divine exotic ghost kings into constant trembling. The Buddha statue's gaze settled on Zhang Buku and sneered, "I am a Buddha immortal. I need much flesh and blood to revive, though I have no wish to resurrect. One of you will be chosen to inherit my legacy." One of the divine exotic ghost kings asked bravely, "And what of the others?" The Buddha immortal turned to him and replied with a hideous laugh, "Naturally, they will be devoured by my inheritor." The hall fell into silence again. Zhang Buku felt uneasy under the Buddha immortal's gaze from before, intuitively sensing that they were being toyed with. He might well be selected as the inheritor, only to be attacked by everyone else. The causality tied to silent destruction vanished unexpectedly. "I have no idea who killed him. You've come just in time for me to choose an inheritor so I can be free." The Buddha immortal's voice sounded again, this time as if talking to himself. Chapter 534. The Realm of Eternal Indestructibility. The Buddha immortal's muttering made Zhang Buku and the others even more nervous, for they could feel the Buddha immortal's urgency. The more so, the more dangerous it was for them. The Buddha statue that the Buddha immortal had transformed into was slightly trembling, as if it were about to crack. "Escape!" The divine exotic realm master immediately gave the order, and almost instantly, the door was breached. Zhang Buku and the others shot out like lightning, darting into the overwhelming yellow sand. "You think this is what kind of place? Escape? You will soon find that killing each other is easier than escaping, for I have already dissolved the causal bonds between you. From this moment onwards, you are all independent beings." The voice of the Buddha immortal resounded, and Zhang Buku as well as the divine exotic ghost kings could feel the restraints on themselves disappear. They had obtained the freedom they had longed for. However, they were not relieved. Instead, they were more afraid. How terrifying must be the cultivation level of a Buddha immortal who could easily dissolve divine exotic causality. Even Zhang Buku, who was afraid of neither heaven nor earth, felt despair. Having left the celestial spirit great world for thousands of years, having endured so many hardships and dangers, is it really going to end today? In Zhang Buku's mind emerged the faces of Guan and Li Ya, not knowing how those two were getting by now. Such thoughts came quickly and left quickly in his mind. He did not have the luxury to think about so much. Go to Wuxia world. Sight after killing the silent destruction god emperor, Gu An's life resumed its tranquility. The celestial spirit god also made no move, still sitting under the world gate. The 7 subordinates of the silent destruction god emperor had not noticed anything amiss. In their view, it was impossible for anything to happen to the silent destruction god emperor, and since their cultivation level was far below that of the silent destruction god emperor, they could not deduce the silent destruction god emperor's causality. The fall of the silent destruction god emperor, capable of overturning the celestial spirit great world, did not cause any impact on this world. The world's currents surge and ebb, there are always those who call the wind and summon the rain falling from power, and there are always new figures emerging, dominating the scene. Time flew by swiftly. 2,000 years passed in a blink of an eye. The human world has entered a new chapter. This year, just after the new year. Immortal seeking island. Gu An was strolling on the street, an Xian and blood prison great saint following behind, with Hu Shaojian walking in front, bending over, continuously introducing the situation along the way for the 3 of them. Hu Shaojian, who was over 8,000 years old, had also reached nirvana, and now held a very high status on Immortal Seeking Island. Many people seeing him so respectfully guiding others, could not help casting curious glances at Gu An. However, as soon as they turned their heads, the image of Gu An was gone from their minds, leaving them puzzled, but it wasn't long before even that puzzlement disappeared. Gu An, looking at the bustling Immortal Seeking Island, had a smile on his face. After leaving the Supreme Sect, Gu An still maintained his relationship with Human World Peak and Immortal Seeking Island. Both powers considered him a reclusive great cultivator, and no one associated him with supporting Dao Sword Venerable. The great heaven and earth is too vast. How many great cultivators were there under the heavens? Like carps crossing the river, the supporting Dao Sword Venerable had already been forgotten by the world. Hu Shaojian kept talking, all the while observing Gu An's expression. Seeing that Gu An was satisfied, he felt very excited. Although he often saw Gu An, today was different. Immortal Seeking Island was hosting its once-century grand event. He was personally in charge of handling it. The street was full of trading stalls, with cultivation treasures as far as the eye could see. Everything that met the eye was his accomplishment, so naturally, he hoped Gu An would praise him. Actually, by now, he no longer needed to get anything from Gu An, but he knew why he could have all this. He cherished it, and was determined to cling to Gu An's coattails for a lifetime, serving him. He wasn't afraid that Gu An wouldn't command him to do things, he was afraid that Gu An would forget him. "You've done very well, keep it up," Gu An said with a smile. Immortal Seeking Island was also important to him. Almost all of his medicinal herb seeds came from Immortal Seeking Island, as did the rewards he bestowed upon his disciples. Despite his high realm, he didn't want to revert to sneaky deeds. He wanted to speed up his path to gaining strength, and it wasn't difficult, but what he desired was to grow stronger steadily and without remorse. If he could achieve that, it would be even better. "I will definitely do better." Hu Shaojian was as excited as if he were on a chicken blood stimulant. Gu An's gaze fell upon a stall where an old man sat on the ground, disheveled, with a young boy squatting beside him. This elder was familiar to Gu An. He had paid attention to him before. Qi Jiuxiao, a genius from the Star Sea congregations, had once competed for Divine Exotic City on the Tai Tsong continent. Gu An had saved Anhao at the time, and also incidentally rescued Qi Jiuxiao and Qi Bei who were accompanying Anhao. This Qi Jiuxiao was no ordinary figure, stepping into the Nirvana realm at the age of 500, what an exaggeration. In terms of the speed of his early cultivation, he was even faster than Anhao, mainly due to the resources of the Star Sea congregations at his disposal. If reaching the Nirvana realm first were to determine talent, then the offspring of the immortal dynasty born in the Nirvana realm could not all be said to possess more talent than Anhao, could they? Gu An could sense that Qi Jiuxiao was injured. While his realm remained, he was unable to gather mana within his body. The boy beside him was his progeny left in the human world, now by his side. Thousands of years had passed, and the situation in the human world had continually changed. The Star Sea congregations had encountered upheaval, with many internal families being purged, including the Qi family. The Star Sea congregations were of no concern to Gu An, and he had no intention of caring. Had it not been for people like in Hao, profound celestial intent, Li Ya, and Zhang Buku who had gone to the Star Sea congregations to cultivate, he wouldn't even bother paying attention to the organization. Gu Wen simply glanced and then withdrew his gaze, continuing forward. Qi Jiuxiao didn't notice Gu An's attention, his mind preoccupied with concerns that the bustling streets could not dispel. "Master, how long will we stay here?" The boy next to him asked, his eyes falling on Gu Wen and others, feeling that these people had an extraordinary status, their aura completely different from the passers-by. Qi Jiuxiao, with his head lowered, softly said, "Until the Immortal Seeking Conference ends." Upon hearing this, the boy sighed, looking at the lively and bustling street, full of longing in his eyes. Since his birth, he had been alone, and it was only last year that he became Qi Jiuxiao's disciple. He cherished his current life, but also longed for a better path in immortal cultivation. After spending half a day at Immortal Seeking Island, Gu Wen took an Xian and Blood Prison Great Saint away. The two had purchased many items on the island, planning to bring them back for the others in the dojo. Back at the dojo, Gu Wen stood before the mountain of 10,000 swords and retrieved the treasured swords that he had selected at Immortal Seeking Island, embedding them into the mountain. The mountain of 10,000 swords now bristled with treasured swords, each containing its own unique sword intent. After placing the swords, Gu Wen began to admire his creation. Over the years, aside from comprehending the Great Tao, he had not neglected the Sword Tao. He could now connect with the Sacred Heart Sword Tao created by Xianxia. After all, Xianxia was him, so controlling the Sacred Heart Sword Tao was not difficult for him. The Sacred Heart Sword Tao, everlasting within the river of Sword Tao, sparked Gu Wen's interest in the river of Sword Tao. If the Tao could become a river, then it could be everlasting. This mystery fascinated him. He hoped that his mountain of 10,000 swords could reach the state of being eternal too. After watching for a while, Gu Wen suddenly felt something, his pupils reflecting a scene. There was a great battle upon the river of Sword Tao. Both combatants possessed the cultivation level of profound Yuan-free immortal. Their Sword Tao prowess was incomparable, not even weaker than the Sword Annihilation ancestor. Gu Wen observed their Sword Tao clash and understood their complex causality. Both hailed from different great thousand worlds, both believers of the Sword Tao, and both looking up to the Sacred Heart Sword Tao. As the long years passed by, Xianxia was no more, but his Sword Tao had become an eternal existence. Chapter 535. The Calamity of a Strange Golden. The void of endless darkness, a sparkling river flowed quietly, with neither its source nor its end in sight. This was the river of Sword Tao, situated within the space of the Great Tao. There were no stars here, no worlds, only endless darkness, and it was the only light in that darkness. The river of Sword Tao was vast and boundless, radiating an ancient and eternal aura. Somewhere along the river of Sword Tao, two figures were engaging in battle, their forms weaving and sword chi crisscrossing. Their sword chi was incredibly powerful, but when it fell into the vast river of Sword Tao, not even a splash was raised. As the scene zoomed in, looking from behind the two men, the river of Sword Tao seemed like an immense ocean, endless from any direction one looked. The collision of two strands of sword chi, carrying the dominant might that could shatter heavens and earth, forced both figures to retreat in unison, creating a distance of 10,000 miles between them. One of them, dressed in a blue robe and holding a wooden sword, directed his gaze toward his distant opponent, squinting as he spoke, "Such a nimble sword, do you hail from the Kanglan sword domain?" The other sword cultivator, dressed in white robes, held a long, slender black sword in his hand, the blade glinting with flowing light as if water slid across it. In response to the inquiry, the white-robed sword cultivator snorted coldly, "Your sword carries a fighting spirit. I didn't expect Battle Court to have people dedicated to the Sword Tao. I had thought Battle Court was all full of obsessive lunatics." The blue-robed sword cultivator answered, "Continuing our fight won't decide a victor." The white-robed sword cultivator remained silent, his eyes filled with dissatisfaction. In the Kanglan sword domain, his Sword Tao might not be the strongest, but he was invincible amongst his peers in the same realm, capable of sweeping through opposition even when entering a new great realm. But today he had met his match, and to make matters feel worse, his opponent came from the very battle court he disdained. Go for a force like the battle court to produce a swordsmanship genius he could not defeat was incredibly frustrating for him. The blue-robed sword cultivator was about to speak again when he suddenly turned his head, and not just him, the white-robed sword cultivator also glanced in the same direction. They both looked towards the same direction, only to see sword chi surging out from within the river of sword Dao, amassing into a figure on the surface of the river. See Tijnel Fire. NT website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. Seeing this figure, both sword cultivators frowned simultaneously, a sense of unease filling their hearts. Far in front of Mountain of 10,000 Swords, Guwen also saw this figure. He was unable to deduce the figure's causality, signifying the person's high level of cultivation. Under Guwen's gaze, the mysterious figure slew 2 profound yuan-free immortals with a single slash, then turned and walked into the river of sword Dao, disappearing from sight. Although he couldn't see through the figure's causal origins, he felt the use of the Sacred Heart Sword Dao. Speaking of which, even the silent destruction god Emperor could not progress in his path upon seeing the Sacred Heart Sword Dao. Just how alluring was the draw of the Sacred Heart Sword Dao? Although Guwen could control the Sacred Heart Sword Dao, he merely borrowed its power and was unable to extract the Sacred Heart Sword Dao from the river of sword Dao. He could allow others to cultivate the Sacred Heart Sword Dao or forbid it. However, before he integrated the memories of Xianxia, someone had already begun cultivating the Sacred Heart Sword Dao, and he had no desire to cut off their progress. Guwen retracted his gaze and continued to stand still in place. After a long time, Chen Chuan arrived beside Guwen and said, "Master, I have encountered a bottleneck." Guwen spoke softly, "The time has not come." Chen Chuan was taken aback. He scratched his head and said awkwardly, "Master, I haven't even said anything yet." The hardest part of immortal cultivation is enduring the years. To resist loneliness and inner restlessness is even more difficult than breaking through realms, Guwen said casually. After speaking, he turned and walked away. Chen Chuan followed his steps and said, "I heard disciples from Qingkuan's sect discussing someone named Lia, who wields the 9 Extremes Sacred Heart Sword. Is the 9 Extremes Sacred Heart Sword the one I wanted to obtain thousands of years ago?" With his current Dao practice, he didn't need to leave the Daoist field of the beginningless to peek into Qingkuan's sect. Unable to leave the dojo, Qingkuan's sect thus became his channel to understand the outside world, and not just for him, it was the same for others within the dojo. Apart from Xinzhen and Xen, the blood prison great saint, the white spirit rat, the others dared not leave the dojo, nor did they challenge Guwen's different treatment of certain individuals, because they knew these people would follow Guwen eternally, while they themselves did not have such firm resolve. Guwen's decision to keep them was also out of the hope that they would accumulate strength. Guwen responded, and after thousands of years had passed, Chen Chuan finally wanted to go out into the world, both to investigate the cause of his parents' deaths and to satisfy his curiosity about the world. He felt his sword should unsheath, to let the world witness his strength. Seeing Guwen's indifferent attitude, Chen Chuan didn't know what to say. Guwen stopped in his tracks and pointed a finger at Chen Chuan's forehead. Chen Chuan couldn't react in time and was instantly immobilized, completely frozen. Guwen then continued on his way. After a while, Chen Chuan awoke with a start, his back drenched in sweat, and he couldn't help but gasp for air. He genuinely felt the sword aura of 2 sword cultivators on the river of sword Dao and saw how they died. At first, he had admired the figures of the 2 sword cultivators, but then a mysterious entity appeared and extinguished them with a single sword strike. Chen Chuan's pride was dampened, and he could appreciate the painstaking care of his master. "I'm not strong enough yet, the time hasn't come," Chen Chuan muttered to himself, his eyes gradually becoming resolute. Night fell, and Guwen was reading in the study, the candlelight illuminating his face. At the table, there was another person reading. It was Xinzhen. Xinzhen had idle time, disliking qi absorption cultivation. Whatever book Guwen was reading, she would also read, and the two would often discuss. Guwen also enjoyed discussing with her. The two were initially connected by their love for books, The books that Guwen enjoyed reading, she would also read, and they would even write books for each other. Guwen was engrossed in his book when he suddenly heard the divine exotic immortal spirit speak. At that moment, Xinjun looked up, her voice excited. This plot twist is great. In a rainy night, they start fighting over a blood feud, and when the male lead is gravely injured, they share an intimate moment to settle regrets, then kill him amid complex emotions. Guwen gave her a look and said, "Can you not read these chaotic books?" He put down the book in his hand and took the book Shenzhen was holding, then studied it carefully. Shenzhen chuckled and fetched another book from the shelf beside her. "Master, please save him. I feel if he dies, I might die too." The voice of the divine exotic immortal spirit rang out in Guwen's heart, anxious. It was speaking of the divine exotic realm master, the source of power of divine exotic city. Guwen, annoyed, replied in his heart, "With me here, even if he dies, you won't die." Upon hearing this, the divine exotic immortal spirit was overjoyed, thanked him, and then dared not bother Guwen any further. Since entering the heaven-balancing golden immortal realm, Guwen's sense of karma had reached new heights. 2,000 years ago, he had heard Zhang Buku's cry for help, but he wanted to use this crisis to make Zhang Buku stronger, so he had not intervened. When the time was right, he would naturally take action. After the divine exotic immortal spirit calmed down, Guwen's thoughts drifted. He thought of Zhang Chuanqiu, his first senior brother when he first joined the Supreme Sect. He remembered how Zhang Chuanqiu used to train him and Meng Lang, as if it were a scene from the distant past. "Senior brother, your son will eventually go to reincarnation to find you. I look forward to the day we can reunite," Guwen said with a slight smile, thinking to himself. In his pupils, a figure appeared, a lean monk that seemed ghostly. Buddha Immortal. If Zhang Buku could not deal with the Buddha Immortal, then Guwen, as his martial uncle, naturally had to stand up for him. It just so happened that the Buddha Immortal had a good relationship with the Silent Destruction God Emperor. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 536, Celestial Court Immortal Gods. Immortal yellow sands swirled into the sky, and within a valley where not a single blade of grass grew, there sat a small blood-red lake in the center, surrounded by cliffs so neatly cut that the valley resembled a gigantic pit, with yellow sand forming an overcast dome above it. In the blood-red lake, Zhang Buku sat bare-chested, with blood acting like long snakes wrapping around his body, constantly writhing. The divine exotic realm master sat at the edge of the lake. Compared to 2,000 years ago, he seemed like a different person, emaciated to the bone, his eyes lifeless, appearing like a skeleton sitting still. Looking around, one could see numerous corpses, all of which were those of the divine exotic ghost king, each having met a horrific, fierce death. Suddenly, a yellow wind descended from the sky, forming a skull above the blood lake. It was the head of a Buddha statue, ancient and time-worn. It was indeed the head of a Buddha Immortal. The Buddha Immortal looked down at Zhang Buku, a strange smile appearing on his face. Zhang Buku seemed to sense something and opened his eyes. He looked up at the Buddha Immortal, his expression calm, not panicked. He asked, "What, you can't resist making a move against me?" The Buddha Immortal sneered in response, "You are now considered my disciple, how should you speak to your master?" Zhang Buku didn't respond, just calmly staring at him. He had stayed here for 2,000 years, enduring torturous pain. His heart had been tempered 1,000 times, and even now, facing death, he would not be flustered. "Indeed, I like your gaze. You are much stronger than these waste ones," the Buddha Immortal disdainfully said. The divine exotic realm master at the edge of the lake trembled slightly, yet was unable to raise his head. Source: Web novel. Calm, updated on. Zhang Buku merely glanced at him without caring. Zhang Buku knew that mere verbal concern would not help him. "Why do you think I chose you?" the Buddha Immortal suddenly asked. Zhang Buku looked at him, waiting for his answer. The Buddha Immortal seemed not to mind Zhang Buku's attitude and smiled. "You were meant to die, saved by others, your destiny changed. People like you are numerous, known as life changers. The greater the change in your destiny, the more complex your karma. That means, the higher your cultivation level, you will gradually become an anomaly of the heavenly Tao and even the great Tao. Life changers are destined for a life of hardships. Cultivation is more challenging for you than for others, but you're also more likely to encounter fortuitous opportunities. Meant to die? Zhang Buku immediately thought of Master Gu. Without Master Gu's rescue, he would have already died. So, I bear such karma, and you choose me, aren't you afraid of the trouble? Zhang Buku asked, staring at the Buddha Immortal. The Buddha Immortal showed a sly smirk. Kid, do you aspire to be an immortal god? Your destiny pattern suits well to ascend to the celestial court. The celestial court? Indeed, that is the domain of the immortal gods. They are the true immortal gods, protected by the celestial Tao destiny. As long as the heavenly Tao remains unaltered, they do not perish. They wield the supreme power, ruling over all the great thousand world. The reason the human world has immortal gods is also because of them. However, mortal spirits cannot see them, and they disdain letting mortal spirits behold their true forms. The Buddha Immortal spoke in a beguiling tone, the appeal of immortality immense. Even the transformed Zhang Buku felt emotional turbulence within. Sir, the novel Fire. Net website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. Cultivating for immortality, isn't it all for longevity? Power does not always come from cultivation level, family background, or a sect, but longevity can only be achieved on one's own. Even though Zhang Buku had traversed many realms, he had never heard of anyone achieving eternal life. I too once belonged to the celestial court, but immortality for me turned into a shackle. Thus, I wish to leave. However, the celestial Tao immortal position cannot be left vacant, otherwise the celestial court will not spare me. You are meant to replace me. The Buddha Immortal looked at Zhang Buku seriously, his voice now devoid of mirth. Zhang Buku asked, "Is it that easy to replace?" The Buddha Immortal replied, "The celestial court isn't the sect you imagine it to be. Immortal gods do not often meet one another. Many immortal gods spend their lives confined to one place, never entering the celestial court, not meeting other immortal gods. To even glimpse the celestial precepts is already a great fortune in life." Zhang Buku understood upon hearing this. The Buddha Immortal's status in the celestial court must be very low, so low that hardly anyone pays attention. This realization bittered his heart. Even the lowest existence in the celestial court could bring him endless despair. Such a terrifying place it was, and he felt that stepping into it would lead to endless troubles. According to the Buddha Immortal, although the celestial Tao immortal position grants immortality, it also strips one of their freedom. Perhaps the Buddha Immortal could only guard this realm. If he had to stay in this sandy world forever, he could not accept it. Seeing Zhang Buku fall into despair, the Buddha Immortal continued, "Only by accepting the celestial Tao immortal position will I give that fellow a chance to live. He can't hold on much longer." Upon hearing this, Zhang Buku turned to look at the divine exotic realm master, his eyebrows slightly furrowed. The Buddha Immortal flew upwards, his voice following him down. "Becoming an immortal god, although you lose your freedom, you still have hope. If you die, there is no hope at all." His voice gradually faded, and his figure soon disappeared into the sands. Zhang Buku stared at the divine exotic realm master, his heart tormented. He owed a debt of gratitude to the divine exotic realm master and could not ignore it. But if he lost his freedom, he could never see Master Gu, Liya again. How long could the non-immortal Master Gu, Liya live? Zhang Buku felt anguished, struggling to make a decision. Meanwhile, in the sands, the Buddha Immortal was still observing Zhang Buku's reaction. He showed a sinister and cold smile, murmuring softly, "Want to become an immortal? Are you worthy? If I don't break your Tao heart, how can I take possession of you?" Suddenly, he felt his head pressed by a palm, making his eyes widen in horror as he discovered he couldn't move, nor could he even project his divine sense. In that moment, his senses failed him. He couldn't see what was above him, nor could he mobilize the mana within his body. Who is it? The Buddha Immortal bit back his fear and asked through gritted teeth. He felt an extremely powerful force of karma around him, isolating him. Now, even if he roared exhaustingly, Zhang Buku wouldn't hear or even see him. Many speculations fluttered through the Buddha Immortal's mind. Whoever was suppressing him was definitely above an innate golden immortal. An existence above an innate golden immortal was not someone he could afford to provoke. Since you know he is a life-changer, why didn't you think more about who changed his destiny for him? A raspy voice reached the Buddha Immortal's ears, making his head tremble. It was for Zhang Buku. How could this child have such a significant backing? The Buddha Immortal immediately said, "Senior, it is my mistake. I am blind to the truth and could not calculate this karma. I am willing to let him go." Just let him go? Pass all your abilities to him, and do not let him know of my existence. All right, no problem. The Buddha Immortal agreed without hesitation, feeling that if he said no, he would be obliterated instantly. Ming soon, if you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 537. Heavenly Tao Inheritor. After the Buddha Immortal left, Zhang Buku couldn't calm his heart any longer. He continued to cultivate in the blood lake, but his mind was constantly making a choice. 3 days later, Zhang Buku made a decision. He could only apologize to Master Gu in his heart, unable to repay his kindness. Buddha Immortal, come out, I agree to your terms. Release him now. Zhang Buku gritted his teeth as he spoke, feeling that repaying Master Gu's kindness was an eternity away, yet the chance to save the divine exotic realm master was right before his eyes. As his words fell, a gust of wind descended from the sky, and the Buddha Immortal immediately appeared before Zhang Buku. He hovered not as high as before, but Zhang Buku didn't notice that. The Buddha Immortal looked at Zhang Buku with a smile and said, "Don't rush. I've changed my mind. I won't kill him, nor will I force you to inherit the Celestial Tao Immortal position. Truth be told, I don't have the Celestial Tao Immortal position at all. The reason I'm hiding here is that I abandoned the Celestial Tao Immortal position. Heaven does not tolerate me. I intended to possess you and live on through your identity." Upon hearing this, Zhang Buku's face turned furious. Anyone would be angry if they were played with, especially after enduring 3 days of inner struggle to come to this decision, and now, facing the enraged Zhang Buku, the Buddha Immortal quickly said, "Anyway, he can still be saved. I've also changed my mind and am prepared to truly cultivate you. For you, this result is better than what you expected." Zhang Buku looked coldly at the Buddha Immortal, clearly not trusting him. The Buddha Immortal inwardly groaned in distress, but, thinking of that terrifying being, he had no choice but to continue explaining. "Upon calculating, I discovered that possession might not yield a good outcome for me, but your destiny pattern is exceptional. I've decided to teach you to the best of my abilities. If one day you achieve enlightenment and possess power beyond my reach, I hope you can turn back and save me." Zhang Buku frowned in doubt at these words, half believing and very hesitant. The Buddha Immortal sighed and said, "From my perspective, millions of years are like a single day. I can continue to wait, at least it's safer. If discovered by Celestial Court, then there's no salvation for me." Source: Web novel. Calm, updated on. Zhang Buku remained silent. The Buddha Immortal immediately turned around, opened his mouth, and spat out a beam of bloody light that fell upon the divine exotic realm master. The realm master's breath rapidly recovered, and their flesh began to look fuller. Seeing this, Zhang Buku believed him for the most part. However, another confusion arose. Did the Buddha Immortal really come to this realization on his own? Why did the whole situation seem so perplexing? Taoist field of the beginningless, inside a room. Nighttime still filled the view outside the window. Shenzhen was still reading. Gu N's spirit retracted without drawing her attention. To warn the Buddha Immortal, it wasn't Guin himself who went, but a manifestation created by the power of karma. With Zhang Buku and the divine exotic realm master there, Guin could quickly locate them. Their world's rules of heaven and earth couldn't restrict Guin. To Zhang Buku, the celestial spirit great world was very, very far away, so distant he didn't know if he could ever return in this lifetime. But in Gu N's eyes, Zhang Buku wasn't too far, even if he was in another great thousand world. Going there wouldn't be too difficult. The hardest part of crossing the great thousand worlds is passing through the world gate, guarded by the celestial spirit god. Gu En was different. He could traverse different great thousand worlds using the river of Sword Dao. The river of the great Dao exists outside the universe, an unfathomable concept. The enlightened can use the river of the great Dao to travel to different places. However, most who enter find themselves perplexed and unable to find an exit. Only the desperate enlightened would flee into the river of the great Dao. Contemplating different great Daos allows entering the respective rivers. Those musing on the path of destiny may enter the river of destiny, and those on the Sword Dao may enter the river of Sword Dao. To glimpse the rivers of the great Dao is incredibly challenging. Not every profound yuan-free immortal can do it. It purely depends on one's comprehension. Gu En closed the book and said, "Dawn is nearly here. You can go back now." Shenzhen glanced at him and asked, "Why the hurry tonight?" "The last time we discussed Green Hero Travelogue, we talked for a whole day and night. I just went through a struggle and am somewhat tired." Sar the Ovalfire. Net website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. What struggle? My will went to grapple with an existence far beyond the 9 heavens of the immortal path, Gu En said, feigning a sense of gravitas. Shenzhen rolled her eyes at this. The night went by, and she never saw Gu En rise from his seat. The words sounded hollow to her, and naturally, she did not believe them. "All right then, it's rare that you hurry me along. I just hope you haven't gotten too engrossed in your books." Shenzhen stood up, placed the book she had in her hands on the table, and then turned to leave. As she reached the door, she looked back at Gu En and asked, "Do I need to illustrate this book tonight?" Gu En glanced at her and said gravely, "How many times must I tell you? There are 3,000 paths to enlightenment, but some paths should be taken less." "Then I won't draw it." "Wait, draw it. It'll help correct your thinking," Gu En replied, causing Shenzhen to cover her mouth and giggle. She didn't argue with Gu En, instead stepping out of the room. Once Shenzhen had closed the door, Gu En took out pen and paper and began to write. In the tranquil cosmic starry sky, the celestial Dao golden core still stood at the end of the long bridge, with an house sitting in meditation before it, looking so solitary. He faced the celestial Dao golden core, brows tightly furrowed. A figure emerged within the celestial Dao golden core, walking toward him, all the way to the edge of the golden core, and then stopped to look at him. "Aren't you still unwilling to let go?" A voice came from within the celestial Dao golden core, seemingly belonging to the young immortal emperor. And Hao didn't open his eyes and said, "It's not that I'm unwilling to let go, I have no choice. You tell me to run, but where can I flee? The river of great Dao is one way out. I am still far from the river of great Dao, and moreover, there are people here I cannot abandon. How foolish! The destruction of heaven and earth is destined. It was long decided that the celestial spirit great world should be destroyed. The only reason why these fragments remain is that the celestial spirit God is waiting for the return of the master of the great world. If you do not flee, you will surely perish along with the fragments of the world. You possess a destiny pattern that should not exist in the great thousand world. To die here would be such a pity." The voice from the celestial Dao golden core came again, urgent in its tone. And Hao did not answer. "Your most revered master has already fled. Don't you understand? Staying here is meaningless." The mysterious voice spoke with a tone of disappointment, prompting Hao to open his eyes. And Hao said gravely, "My master could not possibly flee. If he left, it was for other matters." In his heart, his master was a fearless, transcendent being, one above reproach, even by the whim of heaven. He now realized that the celestial Dao golden core before him was of heavenly Dao, but had betrayed it. The true aim of the celestial spirit God was the master of the golden core. The thought of all the great heaven and earth perishing ignited a fighting spirit within him. He wasn't afraid, nor uneasy, nor even angry. What he had was anticipation. He wanted to make a move amid the destruction, to save the situation from disaster. He sought to be the savior, just like the supporting Dao sword venerable of old, who always managed to turn the tide at the critical moment and save all living beings. He, too, yearned for such a moment. Even if it meant death, he felt it would be worth it. Enough, since that is the case, I shall give you a chance. Other figures began to appear inside the celestial Dao golden core, walking from the depths, more and more of them. As Hao saw this scene unfold, his brows furrowed deeply. He did not rise but waited instead. They are all the heavenly Dao inheritors of past generations. Though they have died, their power can be bestowed upon you. You shall be our last chance. Hearing these words, Hao's pupils gradually turned gold, just like the celestial Dao golden core, exuding the majesty of heavenly Dao. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 538 Imperial Dynasty and Sect. Ever since the Buddha Immortal began teaching Zhangbuku cultivation, 200 years had passed. With the new spring just over, the nine-spirit continent was bathed in sunlight, its vast mountains and rivers brimming with life, while flocks of birds darted out of the forests. Atop a large tree, Guwen leaned against the trunk as he opened his attribute panel to check. Name, Guwen, lifespan, 9045/77, 189, 605, 409. Physique, primordial infinite body. Cultivation level, balancing heaven golden immortal realm perfection. Unconsciously, I had reached the age of 9,000. Guwen felt emotional in his heart, remembering how in ancient Wuxia, those who were second in power often claimed to be 9,000 years old, a far and immortal age for ordinary people. When he reached the age of 9,000, he still felt very young. Compared to those old monsters, he was still a youngster. Youth is wonderful. Guwen's gaze shifted below, where a small stream lay across the forest. On the other side of the stream, an Xian was instructing 3 young disciples of the Qingkuan sect, 2 males and 1 female, all appearing to be 17 or 18. They faced an Xian with great respect, afraid of missing any of her words. Guwen could hear the thoughts of one young man who marveled at how beautiful an Xian was, his face even blushing slightly. This amused Guwen. And Xin's appearance was naturally striking, and coupled with her cultivation at the loose immortal realm, her demeanor was extraordinary, almost like a celestial maiden descending to earth, something these young, newly love-struck juveniles could hardly resist. But with regulations and status differences in place, all they could do was think. After a while, an Xian stood up and said, "All right, you can return now." The 3 Qingkuan sect disciples promptly got up and paid their respects. The young man, filled with admiration for an Xian, asked, "Immortal Master, when can we see you again?" The other 2 also looked at an Xian expectantly. An Xian smiled softly, "If fate allows, we will meet again. I only guide each disciple of the Qingkuan sect once. It's only fair to the others." Upon hearing this, the 3 felt disappointed yet dared not plead, as before coming their masters and the sect's elders had strictly warned them never to offend the immortal master. An Xian waved her sleeve, sending them 100 miles away, not wanting to waste more words. She turned around and looked from side to side, and only after Guwen appeared on a branch did she reveal a smile that would have stunned the 3 disciples had they seen it. During the previous instruction, an Xian had not shown a smile, leading the 3 to believe she didn't smile. "Master, Xianxia still claims these 3 have exceptional talent, yet I felt they were quite mediocre," an Xian spoke up. Guwen replied, "Perhaps you haven't discovered their unique strengths yet. Everyone has virtues." Sar the Nelfire. NT website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. Reflecting on his words, an Xian thought about herself and found her master's words to be reasonable. After all, her Dao practice wasn't sufficient. If she were as powerful as her master, even a common white spirit rat could be trained into a demon king. Guwen flipped down from the branch, leading an Xian towards the dojo. An Xian began to recount the major recent events within the Qingkuan sect. It was said that a genius had emerged within the Qingkuan sect. this disciple originally possessed mediocre talent, and his fiancée had been snatched away by a prodigy of the sect, while his family members were killed. Although many suspected the prodigy was responsible, there was no evidence. Many pitied this disciple, but that was all they could do. After several hundred years of obscurity, this disciple surprisingly demonstrated extraordinary cultivation talent and formidable combat abilities. He challenged the prodigy to a life-and-death combat, and the prodigy had agreed. Life-and-death combat was a rule within the Xianxia sect, necessitating both parties to verbally agree at the law enforcement hall and sign a contract before the combat could proceed. Additionally, harming one's fellow sect members was considered a severe crime. This rule was established to provide an opportunity for those who sought to resolve their grudges. Guwen listened attentively. He didn't feel any sympathy, for such stories were too common in the human world, and there were cases even more tragic than this. He did not even bother to speculate about the outcome. Currently, not everyone could capture his attention. Just looking after people like Li Ya and An Hao, he felt already overwhelmed. Since he had relinquished his responsibilities of guarding the Supreme Sect and the Tai Tsong continent, Guwen's days had become more relaxed. Now was the time he enjoyed most in life, where he could accumulate lifespan and have endless time to do what he desired. Recently, he had been delving into pottery. He planned to build a small town at the edge of the dojo for fun, not for any profit. As Guwen and an Xian were casually discussing the events within the Qingquan sect, far away at the Supreme Sect, Long Qing was also troubled by matters within the sect. Now, Long Qing had become a candidate for sect leader, managing all affairs of the sect, while LV Baitin had long retreated to pursue Taoist techniques. In the Elder Hall, Long Qing sat at the primary seat with Long Jun and Candle Star standing on his sides. Dozens of elders gathered in front, incessantly debating. The Tai Tsong imperial dynasty has always followed orders from the Supreme Sect. Li Xiandao actually allowed his generals to compete with our direct disciples for precious treasures. Clearly he's testing us. That's right, Li Xiandao has really gone too far in recent years. The imperial power should not be controlled by one person. I think Li Xiandao wants to become a ruler like those of the Immortal dynasty. Don't forget, the Immortal dynasty was the one who started the war against the Holy Court. With the Saint King of the Holy Court supporting Li Xiandao, he indeed has the capacity to be arrogant. The most critical point is that this Saint King is a disciple of the supporting Dao Sword Venerable. If Dragon Gate Master could persuade Yang Jian, would Li Xiandao still dare to be rampant? The elders discussed fervently. Ji Hantian looked at Long Qing seriously. Long Qing, do you have a way to contact your master? Upon this statement, everyone fell silent. The reason Long Qing felt troubled was because it involved Yang Jian, who he heard was the favorite disciple of his master. He answered, I cannot, but with my master's Dao practice, he is certainly watching every move of the Supreme Sect. Ji Hantian remained silent, and the elders exchanged glances. Many elders had never met the supporting Dao Sword Venerable, but they had heard many legends about him. Especially after entering the Elder Hall, they understood more about his esteemed status within the Supreme Sect. As long as the sword intent on the heaven-repairing platform remained undissipated, the revered status of the supporting Dao Sword Venerable within the Supreme Sect would not fade, nor would anyone dare to challenge his authority. An ancient sect elder spoke up. The Tai Tsong imperial dynasty has already dominated many seas, and although the Supreme Sect is growing stronger, its expansion is not as aggressive as that of the Tai Tsong imperial dynasty. I think instead of suppressing the Tai Tsong imperial dynasty, we should focus on developing the Supreme Sect. Once the Supreme Sect is strong enough, the Tai Tsong imperial dynasty will naturally come back to us. Hearing this, a female elder couldn't help but retort, Develop? How do we develop? We are a sect, and our disciples' main duty is cultivation, not territorial expansion, plus we claim to adhere to the righteous Tao and must not plunder. Her words resonated with many. Suddenly, Candle Star chuckled, looking to develop? Your opportunity has indeed arrived. Everyone immediately looked at him, their faces filled with expectation. Candle Star was a highly accomplished Taoist, and his words might be true. Moreover, Candle Star had accompanied Long Qing for thousands of years, frequently aiding the supreme sect, thus holding immense prestige, which was also why Long Qing could swiftly wield great power. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 539, Celestial Spirits End. Invincible Power. Ji Hantian looked at Candlestar and asked respectfully, I hope the senior can enlighten us. What exactly is the opportunity? Candlestar smiled and said, the Immortal Dynasty will soon disperse. That is the opportunity. The Immortal Dynasty will disperse? Wish. The elders were shocked. To them, the Immortal Dynasty and Holy Court were colossal entities within great heaven and earth, overlord-level forces. The chaos in the world was due to the struggle between these two powers. How could the Immortal Dynasty, which had stood through countless calamities, now fall? Long Qing also felt surprised and looked at Candlestar in astonishment. Candlestar smiled and said, ever since the young Immortal Emperor perished, although the Immortal Dynasty has introduced a new Immortal Emperor, he simply cannot quell the internal turmoil. Thousands of years have passed, and this towering tree of Xianxia is finally going to fall. But with its fall comes vigorous life for all beings on the earth, be it Taoist techniques, magical treasures, or fortunes of the land. The supreme sect could gain much, much more from the fall of the Immortal Dynasty. These words made the elders' hearts surge with excitement. They began to inquire when the Immortal Dynasty would fall, to which Candlestar smiled mysteriously and said, soon. The news of the Immortal Dynasty's impending fall spread throughout the world like a whirlwind, causing great alarm. Without the Immortal Dynasty, wouldn't the Holy Court dominate the world, and wouldn't the world welcome an era of peace? Such thoughts arose in the hearts of 90% of those in immortal cultivation, and in time, more and more beings and powers started to anticipate the fall of the Immortal Dynasty, which forced the internal factions of the Immortal Dynasty to struggle even more fiercely. It seemed as if the dissolution of the Immortal Dynasty was the direction of the celestial mandate, and under such a major trend, the Holy Court, on the contrary, appeared very silent. Because the young Immortal Emperor had moved another great world next to the celestial spirit great world, powerful forces began to rise there as well. Hearing that the Immortal Dynasty would fall, the powers on the other side developed even more rapidly, as if afraid of missing their chance. Against this backdrop, another 10 years passed. Deep in the universe, within the silent extinction domain, fog from the great Tao surged, making the universe seem so quiet. The World Gate, symbolizing the end of the universe, remained steadfast. The celestial spirit god, sitting in meditation beneath the World Gate, radiated strong heavenly Tao light, dazzling and splendid. Beneath the strong light, the figure of the celestial spirit god seemed to have even more presence than the World Gate. Suddenly, the World Gate burst forth with a red light, flickering slightly, and in nearly an instant, the celestial spirit god opened his eyes, and two cold rays burst forth, scattering the great Tao fog as if it had met its natural predator. The celestial spirit god stood up, and the space of the universe twisted around him. He raised his right hand and reached out across the distance. As he clenched his fist, the red light on the surface of the World Gate vanished abruptly, and all seemed to return to calm. At the Taoist field of the beginningless, by the lakeside, Guan, who was fashioning clay pottery, looked up and saw the mighty destiny that had enveloped the continent of the Immortal Dynasty dissipate in an instant. Without destiny, the rules binding the immortal spirits suddenly vanished, as did the transcendent force uniting the immortal spirits. Next, the Immortal Dynasty would face unprecedented chaos. Slaughter, plunder, revenge, and so on. Even immortal spirits born into the Nirvana realm revealed the dark side of human nature. The continent of the Immortal Dynasty turned into the human world's hell in a very short span of time. Those who wielded great power began to seek their own interests, tearing apart their usual facades to become entities that the common people of the Immortal Dynasty feared. Guan continued to shape his pottery while watching this unfold. Having experienced so many lives through reincarnation, Guan's Tao heart had entered a higher level. In the worlds created by the great Tao, tragic scenes were everywhere. If one could not overcome the psychological impact and emotional pull of witnessing the tragedies of the human world, how was one to achieve enlightenment? Sir, the Oval Fire. At website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. With the celestial spirit God personally dissolving the destiny of the immortal dynasty, Gu and saw the endpoint of the celestial spirit great world. The heaven and earth Tao fruit, symbolizing the heart of heaven and earth, would emerge in the future, and the world's powerful would flock to it. When someone obtained the power of that Tao fruit, the celestial spirit God would appear, and this time he would destroy everything. Pieces of the great world within the universe would cease to exist, one after another. In that vast and spectacular scene of destruction, the celestial spirit God turned and stepped toward the world gate. As he entered the world gate, it too turned into ash, indicating that this universe, this shattered great thousand world, would disappear. Watching this future, Guan couldn't help thinking about Hao, Liya, and others. With the lifespan dojo and his own cultivation level present, even if the universe perished, he was able to keep the people he cared about alive. But Hao, Liya, Long Qing, and profound celestial intent were not the kind to quietly stay in the dojo, and they also had their own loved ones to think about. Human world was like a net, with each person intertwined in countless relationships that connected the whole of great heaven and earth. The person could be insignificant, trivial, but a person could also be crucial, indispensable. Guan was faced with only two choices. The first was to annihilate the celestial spirit God, offend the celestial court. The second was to play dead, give up the world he had lived in for a lifetime. He wasn't in a hurry to decide. Even if he chose to annihilate the celestial spirit God, he would still strive to delay as long as possible. The longer he could stall, the more lifespan he would accumulate, and the more confident he would be in dealing with the trouble from the celestial court that would follow. When faced with trouble, don't rush, don't panic, just one word: delay. Guan said leisurely, the pottery in his hands now taking the shape of a cauldron, its surface seemingly adorned with a dragon. The blood prison great saint, standing by his side, curiously asked, "Master, what are you referring to?" The blood prison great saint could sense the changes in heaven and earth but couldn't pinpoint exactly what was changing. He just felt that the world had become more tense, more dangerous. Any matter? Gu and his answer made the blood prison great saint's eyes light up. He felt his master was guiding him. The blood prison great saint pressed on, "Master, how many more years will it take for this great chaos under heaven to end?" Guan looked at the pottery in his hands and said, "It will be faster than you imagine but also worse than you can imagine." He knew what Hao was thinking, understood the young man's lofty ambitions. But no matter how great the opportunities Hao had, even if he merged with the power of the heaven and earth Tao fruit, he wouldn't be a match for the celestial spirit God. Well, it was good for the young man to realize that the affairs of the world were far from as easy as he thought. He'd wait for Hao's despair, then he would make his move. Thinking this, Guan began to look forward to Hao's transformation. Hao was good in every way, except he didn't value feelings enough. His heart was always filled with Guan and Xian. He always felt he was born alone, that he only needed to repay gratitude. As for the wife who didn't show him kindness, he could abandon her. Within Hao's cultivation level, he must have sensed that he still had blood relations alive, but he didn't acknowledge them. This displeased Guan, simply put, and Hao lacked a sense of responsibility. However, it was precisely because Hao had flaws that Guan felt more motivated to guide him. If the young man was perfect, it would be hard for him to give advice. Worse? How bad? Asked the blood prison great saint. Guan glanced at him, and gold light burst forth from his eyes, piercing into the blood prison great saint's forehead, freezing him in place. Afterward, Guan continued to shape the pottery. For a long time, the blood prison great saint awoke with a gasp, then started breathing heavily, trembling all over, sweat pouring down his forehead like rain, and blood quickly filled his eyes. He looked at Guan in fear and asked, "Master, who exactly was that figure?" "The celestial spirit God." Because it was inside the dojo, which isolated cause and effect, Guan wasn't afraid of being discovered by the celestial spirit God. After hearing this, The Blood Prison Great Saint memorized the name, looking at Guan, wanting to say more but hesitating. The might of the celestial spirit god had deeply shaken him. He hadn't imagined someone could be so powerful. The vastness of the celestial spirit great world was turned into dust by the celestial spirit god in an instant. Not just the celestial spirit great world, but countless other worlds too were destroyed. The Blood Prison Great Saint wanted to ask Guan who was stronger between him and the celestial spirit god but was afraid of offending him. Although the Blood Prison Great Saint held Guan in the utmost awe, after witnessing the strength of the celestial spirit god, it was hard to believe again that Guan was invincible. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 540. The strongest of the Long family. Guan nearly laughed out loud when he heard the words of the Blood Prison Great Saint, but he restrained himself. He did not dispel the Blood Prison Great Saint's confusion, preferring to let the fellow continue his anxious trepidation. It served him right since the Blood Prison Great Saint had been somewhat negligent in recent years. Seeing that Guan was unwilling to speak, the Blood Prison Great Saint's inner perplexity grew, but he dared not voice it. Instead, he pushed aside his inner fears and apprehension and shifted his focus. Even if his master was no match for that person, his master certainly had a strategy in place, or else he would not be so at ease on ordinary days. With this thought, the Blood Prison Great Saint's heart gradually calmed. He looked again at Guan's clay molding, finding deep significance in every movement. Today, his master had shown him the fate of the world, surely not acting on a whim. Perhaps it was a warning to him. Under the serene and tranquil years, a catastrophe was always brewing. The Blood Prison Great Saint felt sorrow for this world. Major sects and imperial dynasties were ceaselessly vying, chasing after the celestial mandate and heavenly Tao. Yet, in the end, in the face of absolute power as heaven and earth perished together, all their scheming would be rendered meaningless. Previously, the Blood Prison Great Saint wondered why, with such formidable power, his master chose to cultivate in seclusion. Now he understood. His master had seen through everything. The Blood Prison Great Saint gazed at the clay in Guan's hands and began to reflect, pondering his own past. After dispersing the destiny of the Immortal dynasty, the celestial spirit god sat down to meditate once more, and Guan no longer paid attention to external affairs, focusing solely on his current task. What followed would be the most chaotic period for the world. Facing such chaos, the Holy Court, contrary to its normal behavior, did not aggressively annex the territories left by the Immortal dynasty but began to withdraw, pulling back to the sacred domain. This further fueled the madness of the world's forces, all eager to seize this opportunity to ascend. The Supreme Sect and the Taizong dynasty were no different. From the highest echelons to the common folk, everyone knew that this was an unprecedented opportunity, a decisive moment for the pattern of the world. All internal conflicts were set aside, and those in power grew increasingly bold and ambitious as each day passed. While the Supreme Sect was frantically exploring the outer realms, Long Qing, on the other hand, was confined to the Third Medicine Valley by Long Jun. On this evening, seated in meditation on a cliff, Long Qing could not help but open his eyes and turn to look at Long Jun, who was reading nearby. Long Jun was holding the investiture of the gods, engrossed in the book, which greatly irritated Long Qing. He had read that book many times over, yet he was still reading it. Long Qing could not comprehend why Long Jun, after imparting the celestial dragon dharma aspect to him, did not take his teaching seriously and even forbade him from venturing out. Most importantly, in the face of Long Jun, even Candle Star dared not utter a word. Studying the celestial dragon dharma aspect was for the destiny of the Long family. Long Qing was willing to accept this mission, but sometimes he wondered if living just to break the family's curse was truly meaningful. He thought of his master, who never rushed his cultivation when he was present. Now, he was being forced to cultivate by someone else. He finally understood his master's words, that bearing karma was not so easy. The time before recovering his destiny pattern was the happiest of his life. The longer he practiced the celestial dragon technique, the more he yearned for the past. No matter how patient one is, there comes a day of eruption. Long Qing was about to burst, and he couldn't help but say, "With the world in such turmoil, do you think the battle court will still come as you said?" Long Jun, without even lifting his head, said, "It has already arrived. It's in the holy court." Long Qing frowned and asked, "Then why haven't they made their move? Killing you would be acting on behalf of the battle court, but this world holds opportunities they cannot resist. That's also why I chose to come to this era. Right now, I can do a lot." Long Jun's answer silenced Long Qing. Irresistible opportunities? He wanted them too. He wanted to become stronger, to be renowned across the world, to live a spirited life. Suddenly, Long Jun asked, "Do you think the Taoist Hong Jun in this book endured countless lonely years to achieve the Tao, or did he struggle through hardships and persevere to attain it?" Hearing this, Long Qing couldn't help but roll his eyes. Could it be that Long Jun was so obsessed because he saw himself in Taoist Hong Jun? He had once been obsessed with the investiture of the gods, and naturally knew that Taoist Hong Jun was the strongest and most mystic presence within it. At least Taoist Hong Jun, when facing difficulties, didn't pin his hopes on future generations, quipped Long Qing. Upon hearing this, Long Jun fell silent. Only the sound of the wind remained atop the cliff. The more Long Qing thought about it, the more he became frustrated. Why should he bear the burden of the Long clan's mission? The debt of life was too great. Forcing him to cultivate his ancestors' dharma aspects to fight for him, why was he so rebellious? If the ancestors were so powerful, how could the Long clan end up like this? Sir the Novel Fire. Net website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. Long Qing truly didn't believe that the Long clan had the strength to defy the battle court. The more he thought, the angrier he became, and with anger came despair in the depths of his heart. Qi blood surged, causing him to feel dizzy. The world in his eyes shook unceasingly, the dusk-lit celestial vault so desolate and beautiful, it gave him a sense of facing the end. At that moment, he felt slightly relieved in his heart. If he were to fall now, it wouldn't be so bad. If life was for death, then why not die earlier? Long Qing gradually lost control of his body, beginning to topple to the side. A hand caught his head, preventing him from falling. In a daze, he saw a figure appear before him, standing on the edge of the cliff, back-facing him. The figure was so majestic, exuding an earth-shattering presence, making Long Qing feel an unstoppable valor and indomitable spirit. Suddenly, Long Qing's world became clear again. He quickly regained his senses and control over his body, sitting up to find the figure before him gone, as if it were an illusion. The person supporting him was Long Jun. Long Qing hastened to his feet, looking around to find the figure he had just seen. For some unknown reason, he felt that the figure was very powerful, perhaps capable of solving the archenemy of the Long clan. Standing beside him, Long Jun asked, "What did you just see?" Without thinking, Long Qing replied, "I saw someone, his back was turned to me." Unable to find the figure, Long Qing turned to Long Jun and, seeing a look of relief on Long Jun's face, couldn't help but ask, "Do you know who that person was?" Long Jun replied, "When you cultivate the celestial dragon dharma aspect, the first thing you'll see is Emperor Longxin, which is my father's image. Actually, to cultivate the celestial dragon dharma aspect, you need intense emotional stimulation, so I didn't give you specific guidance. I wanted to wait for you to initiate it first." Emperor Longxin. Long Qing murmured to himself, the figure from before reflected in his eyes. Long Jun eyed him and said, "Actually, the Long clan is very strong. Many died from accidents or passed away prematurely. If the Long clan were so weak against the battle court, they wouldn't have pressed us so relentlessly." These words eased the resentment in Long Qing's heart significantly. Long Qing couldn't help asking, "Is Emperor Longxin the strongest of our Long clan?" Long Jun shook his head and said, "The most powerful feature of the celestial dragon dharma aspect is that the ancestors you summon might reveal the limits of their strength because different people will summon ancestors of different strengths when they cultivate the celestial dragon dharma aspect. If you can summon my son, we will have even more hope. Of course, if you could summon all of the Long family members, that would be the most hopeful moment." Long Qing frowned and asked, "Are you sure your son is stronger than Emperor Longxin?" He could not forget the figure of Emperor Longxin, so unbeatable. He did not believe any other member of the Long family could be stronger than Emperor Longxin. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 541. Just enough to wipe out the celestial and earthly immortals. Once you can cultivate his Dharma aspect, you will understand that he can bear all hope. Long Jun turned his head towards the distance, speaking softly, his eyes revealing a sense of nostalgia. Long Qing then continued to fantasize about Emperor Longxin. After a while, he began to inquire about the deeds of Emperor Longxin. Since Long Qing had already entered the threshold of the celestial dragon Dharma aspect, Long Jun's attitude had changed, and he began to recount the deeds of Emperor Longxin, with Long Qing listening intently. The more stories Long Qing heard, the calmer his heart became. Understanding the past of the Long clan could help him deepen his understanding of the Long clan and strengthen his sense of honor and disgrace. In my view, throughout the ages, the Long clan deserve their fate today. When powerful, they oppressed all around, and also gave birth to many extreme prodigies. However, the Long clan should not be oppressed by the battle court. Breaking the Long clan's fate and destroying the battle court also counts as settling our karmic ties, since the battle court was created by us, but they committed sins in the name of the battle court. It began with the Long clan and must end with the Long clan. Long Jun spoke earnestly, pausing before saying, "Your descendants should no longer bear the surname Long." Upon hearing this, Long Qing did not shake his head in denial. He was still immersed in the stories of Emperor Longxin. Though he had only seen the back of Emperor Longxin, Long Qing was instantly awed by him, developing a strong sense of adoration. He began to look forward to the celestial dragon Dharma aspect. At least once he had mastered the celestial dragon Dharma aspect, he could witness the elegance of Emperor Longxin. 100 years later, the human world was a new landscape. The nine-spirit continent was finally entangled in the maelstrom of great chaos, with more and more great cultivators fleeing into this continent, causing the winds and clouds of the continent to surge. On the edge of the continent, on a beach, two women descended from the sky and upon landing, they quickly sat down to start cultivating energy. One of them, dressed in green with delicate makeup, only her hair was slightly messy, while the other, dressed in white and even more beautiful, resembled a fairy of the human world, but her face was completely pale, clearly having sustained serious injuries. The green-clad woman opened her eyes and looked at the white-clad woman, asking, "Sister, are we safe here?" The white-clad woman, named Li Xuanyu, slowly opened her eyes, turned her head towards the distance, and said faintly, "Hard to say." The green-clad woman, named Tang Kai, furrowed her brows upon hearing Li Xuanyu's words and sighed heavily. "How much longer must we run, and how can Li Ya find us?" Tang Kai asked anxiously. Li Xuanyu did not answer. She closed her eyes again to continue healing. Seeing this, Tang Kai also closed her eyes to heal. Time quickly passed. About an hour later, suddenly a strong wind blew from the end of the ocean, startling both women into opening their eyes. "Let's go. It seems they don't plan to let us go," Li Xuanyu said as she stood up, her figure trembling, almost falling, but Tang Kai promptly supported her. Without delay, Tang Kai summoned a magical treasure and helped Li Xuanyu to fly deeper into the continent. Sir, the Novel Fire. Net website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. Shortly after they had left, countless black crows attacked from the sky, swarming and covering the heavens, their speed extremely fast as they quickly flew into the continent. Tang Kai, who was maneuvering the magical treasure, seemed to sense something, turning her head to look, her face changing drastically with panic filling her eyes. "They're so fast, what should we do?" Tang Kai looked at Li Xuanyu next to her and asked in a low voice. Although Li Xuanyu had suffered severe injuries, she had always been Tang Kai's support. If it weren't for the need to protect her along the way, Li Xuanyu would not have sustained such serious injuries. Li Xuanyu's face remained calm as she said, "Leave me behind, and you escape. They're mainly targeting me." Upon hearing this, Tang Kai was immediately agitated and said, "What nonsense are you talking about? I promised Li Ya that I must keep you safe. Either we die together or you live, and later, find Li Ya to avenge me," Li Xuanyu said, her tone unflinching. Tang Kai fell silent. Li Xuanyu grabbed Tang Kai's wrist with one hand and stared at her steadfastly. Tang Kai clenched her teeth, manipulated her magical treasure, and flew downward. The two women landed in a forest, and Tang Kai helped Li Xuanyu to sit down in front of a tree. "Let's hurry and get moving, stop dawdling," Li Xuanyu said as she sat down, her face growing even paler, but she still urged. Tang Kai stood up, walked a few steps outward, then stopped in her tracks. She clenched her sleeves, unable to leave. Li Xuanyu looked at her, a trace of relief flashing in her eyes. Just as she was about to speak, a voice came from deep within the forest. "Are you outsiders?" Li Xuanyu and Tang Kai both turned their heads to look, and saw a yellow-robed woman who looked like a fairy walking out from the forest with a bamboo basket in her hand, a gentle smile on her face. The newcomer was an Xian. Li Xuanyu frowned and examined an Xian closely. Tang Kai asked, "Who are you? Why are you here?" After all, she possessed a Nirvana realm cultivation level, and in her perception, there were no living beings within 1,000 li. How could an Xian have approached them silently? How could she not be cautious? An Xian smiled and said, "My name is an Xian. As I was passing by, I calculated that I have a connection with you too, so I wanted to come and help." She was curious in her heart, not knowing which one was Elder Li's sister and which was Elder Li's beloved. Her gaze fell on Li Xuanyu, whose facial features slightly resembled Elder Li. She guessed that she must be Elder Li's sister. Li Xuanyu always felt the name an Xian sounded familiar, as if she had heard it somewhere before, but she couldn't remember. Perhaps some cultivator had mentioned a similar-sounding name. "How can you help us? Do you know what we are fleeing from?" Tang Kai asked cautiously. An Xian smiled and said, "You have no choice, you can't abandon her, can you?" Tang Kai was silent. Just then, countless black crows attacked from the depths of the forest, like darkness swallowing everything, causing Tang Kai's face to change dramatically and Li Xuanyu to instinctively raise her hand. An Xian quickly turned around, a long pen appearing in her hand. With a swing, the crows turned into flying ash, forming a black mist that spread through the forest. Tang Kai's eyes widened, and even Li Xuanyu was startled by Nzin's action. The wind blew Nzin's long hair and dress. She slightly tilted her head, glanced at Li Xuanyu and Tang Kai from the corner of her eye, and smiled. "Does this count as helping you?" Tang Kai said dazedly, "It counts, but the real pursuers are still behind us." An Xian asked, "What realm is he in?" "Heaven and earth flying immortal realm. It's a coincidence. The pen in my hand is just enough to extinguish a celestial and earthly immortal." An Xian raised the fate pen in her hand, smiling triumphantly. Sunlight poured through the gaps in the leaves, casting light on her, making her appear so exceptional in Tang Kai's eyes. Such a demeanor she had only seen in Li Ya before, which was an absolute confidence that any trouble could be solved. Even Li Xuanyu had to admit that an Xian truly possessed a convincing aura. She suddenly remembered she had heard the name an Xian before, apparently from Li Ya, but why she brought up the name still wasn't clear, as it was a matter from long ago. If this woman knew Li Ya, then she could be trusted. An Xian put away her pen, then turned and smiled. "Come with me. It'll take you to a place to heal. It's your first time on the Nine-Spirit continent, right? You can stay here for a while, perhaps you will find some serendipity." Tang Kai hurriedly gave her thanks and asked, "Senior, why do you want to help us?" She couldn't be at ease without asking. An Xian blinked and said, "I know Li Ya, is that enough?" Upon hearing this, Tang Kai did not show joy. Instead, suspicion appeared in her eyes. "If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 542. This will be the greatest opportunity of your lives. Night fell. An Xian was temporarily staying in a monastery with Li Xuanyu and Tang Kai, where a fire blazed in the courtyard, its flickering light casting shadows on the walls. Tang Kai watched an Xian intently, her eyes filled with hostility, while an Exen admired the fate pen. Having used the fate pen more than once or twice, an Exen greatly enjoyed the vast power it contained. Unfortunately, after each use, her master would take it back, so she treasured the time she had with it and wanted to investigate why the pen was so formidable. As for Tang Kai's gaze, an Exen had noticed it long ago and could guess Tang Kai's thoughts, but she intentionally offered no explanation. Because it was fun. Tang Kai treasured elderly like a treasure, but an Exen felt that elderly was just SOSO, and nowhere near as formidable as her own master. Every time her master mentioned elderly, he would describe how elderly got beaten up, using him as a negative example, so how could she possibly like elderly? Thinking of this, the corners of Nzin's mouth couldn't help but lift. Seeing an Exen smile, Tang Kai grew even angrier, but she couldn't lash out. After all, an Exen had saved their lives. While meditating and healing, Li Xuanyu kept thinking about the name an Exen. Finally, she remembered, and opening her eyes, she looked towards an Exen and asked, "Are you Gu An's disciple?" Mentioning Guan, the blurry face in her memory gradually became clear. It had been over 9,000 years since she left the Taizong continent, and she had never returned. Her meeting with Li Ye was purely coincidental on an island, and Li Ye did not reveal that Guan was the supporting Dao Sword Venerable. Li Xuanyu could not associate Guan with the supporting Dao Sword Venerable either, since when she knew Guan, he was just a medicine boy, and she had even helped him manage an introduction to take care of a cave mansion. Back then, Guan had run around for a few spirit stones. Later, however, she had realized that Guan was not simple and hid secrets, but she never thought of him in terms of the supporting Dao Sword Venerable. An Exen turned her head towards her and smiled brightly. "Yes, elderly, my master has mentioned you too. He said that when he was young, you helped him a lot." Hearing this, Li Xuanyu was sure she hadn't misheard, and a smile appeared on her face as she said reflectively, "I didn't really help him much, just lending a hand. How has he been doing lately?" An Exen replied, "He's doing well, don't worry." Could it be that he is also on this continent? No, that's not the case. No one knows where he has gone. An Exen shook her head. This wasn't her being secretive, but rather Guan genuinely wanting to hide his whereabouts, not wanting to attract trouble, and she definitely couldn't cause trouble for Guan. She was curious about the image of Guan in Li Xuanya's mind, so she started to share the stories Guan had told her, and Li Xuanyu also fell into reminiscence. Tang Kai was also captivated by the stories an Exen told and gradually forgot her jealousy. Hearing that Guan was Li Ya's junior brother, Tang Kai grew even more interested, as she was very curious about everything related to Li Ye, but unfortunately, before she could learn more about Li Ye, she had parted ways with him. The stories an Exen told were those Guan had shared with her. They might have seemed mundane, but on such a night, they brought Li Xuanyu and Tang Kai a sense of warmth and a touch of happiness. In Li Xuanya's mind, Guan also gradually became clearer, and the old memories surfaced. Remembering how reserved Guan had been in front of her, a smile also appeared on her face. Over 9,000 years had passed, and many old acquaintances were buried in the earth, but Guan was still alive, and she was genuinely happy and surprised that Guan could teach such a disciple. A millennium passes just like a flicker in the human world. 9,000 years brought about such great changes. When an Exen finished speaking, Tang Kai curiously asked, "What is Gu An's cultivation level now?" An Exen glanced at her, smiling radiantly. "How would I know? See this pen? This is his magical treasure." While speaking, an Exen raised the fate pen in her hand. Li Xuanyu and Tang Kai both looked towards the fate pen in Nzin's hand, unable to forget the sight of an Exen wielding the pen to eradicate a group of demons. Those black crows were no ordinary creatures. Even a loose immortal hit by them would be drained of all their blood essence. Just as an Exen was showing off the fate pen, Guan, who was far away in the Taoist field of the beginningless, lay reading a book while listening to their conversation. "Senior Sister Li, it really has been many years." Guan lay on a chair, a book in his hands, the corners of his mouth slightly upturned. That Li Xuanyu and Tang Kai were able to come to the Nine-Spirit continent was due to his guidance, using celestial signs to bring them to the Nine-Spirit continent coincidentally, And along the way, their survival from numerous brushes with death also had Guan's secret assistance. Back then, Li Xuanyu indeed had helped Guan, so if he could lend a hand with just a simple effort, he naturally would not be stingy. Helping Li Xuanyu was also for Li Ya's sake. With Li Ya's own sister and future wife in danger, how could he not rescue them? The reason he led the two women to the Nine-Spirit Continent was because a great catastrophe was about to come outside, and only on the Nine-Spirit Continent would they be completely safe. Guan closed his book and shut his eyes, lazily saying, "After you finish your act, I take the stage and the heroes of the world take turns, but who can really see through how deep the waters of this world are? Celestial Spirit God, I look forward to clashing with you." His voice echoed only within the room. He was speaking to himself. Amidst the mountains, Li Xuanyu and Tang Kai stood on a slope, looking at the magnificent scene ahead. Both women remained silent. Sir, the novel fire. NT website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. Following their gaze, in front of the mountains appeared a gigantic chasm, stretching to the ends of heaven and earth. The mountains on either side, too, had been pierced, as if a dragon comparable in size to the mountains had rolled over them, leaving behind this broken landscape. An Xian descended from the sky, casually playing with the fate pen. She chuckled. "Celestial and earthly immortals are just this, huh?" Li Xuanyu and Tang Kai had been on the Nine-Spirit Continent for several months, and today, the mastermind who had been pursuing them had finally come to kill them. After a round of negotiations, an Xian, unable to stand the other side's ranting, chose to eradicate them. Tang Kai opened her mouth, but found herself unable to speak. The supreme great power that was the cause of her despair, just like that, was dead? Li Xuanyu looked at the fate pen with a complex expression in her eyes. Is Guan's cultivation level now at least higher than the heaven and earth flying immortal realm? She couldn't understand. She felt that her own adventures were numerous, and in her view, only Li Ya's growth rate was faster than hers. In fact, she always believed she was second to none. But what she witnessed today overturned her understanding. She felt that her peers couldn't possibly possess such power, let alone slaughtering celestial and earthly immortals. Even killing wandering immortals seemed unbelievable. An Xian looked at them and smiled. "Settle down in the Nine-Spirit Continent. It will change your lives. I want to accompany you further." With that, she turned and walked away, but after a few steps, she stopped again. "Let me remind you once more, stay here. This will be the greatest opportunity of your lives. If you insist on leaving, you will regret it for the rest of your lives." An Xian leaped up, transforming into a streak of light and disappearing into the horizon. Tang Kai couldn't help but look at Li Xuanyu and asked, "What should we do? Listen to her?" Li Xuanyu looked in the direction an Xian had left and asked, "Do you want to have cultivation like hers, to stand shoulder to shoulder with Li Ya in the future, rather than always chasing behind him?" These words stunned Tang Kai. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible.